What you hear is a cry of anger and bitterness.
The Jews got power! The Jews got power! The Jews got power! Freedom got to get them!
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream. I have a dream. I have a dream.
4 years have now passed since Dr. King stood on these steps and spoke those words. Yet it all seems so long ago and in some ways so unreal. What happened to the dream? It ended, as all dreams must end, when it confronted reality. Perhaps the nation was living in a dream. This is the Rights Act of 1965. It was out of touch with reality to the extent that it believed that court decisions and the mere passage of laws would give Negroes true and meaningful equality with all deliberate speed. For when the court decisions had been handed down and the laws had been passed, and Negroes were guaranteed those rights promised all Americans by the Constitution, they were merely brought to the starting line of the race. But when they took their places at the starting line and then lifted up their heads, they found that most of their white countrymen were already 80 yards down the track. But the race had to be run. In the South, where in many rural counties Negroes outnumber the whites, the emphasis was on voter registration. And registration was power. The Negroes knew it, and so did the whites. And soon the pattern of politics in the South was changed by the very fact that the Negro vote could no longer be ignored. It had become an important factor in Southern politics.
Have you ever been declared living in the same bound?
The information I was provided is true and correct to the best of my knowledge. Will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. So help me God. Thank you.
But if there was progress in the South, there was violent resistance in the North. The nation suddenly learned what it should have known, that racial prejudice was not just a Southern problem. It was nationwide. If whites in the North formerly could comfort themselves by pointing an accusing finger at the South, they could do so no longer. School segregation by neighborhood, violence against Negroes moving into all-white communities. These were facts, real and immediate. And resistance to Negro demands was every bit as determined in Cicero as it had been in Birmingham. White backlash produced frustration and confusion. This turned in time to disappointment, bitterness, and anger. And this produced counter-reaction, expressed in the call for black power. As a radical movement, it became linked to opposition to the war in Vietnam. Its most articulate spokesman, Stokely Carmichael.
The first man in this country to die for the War of Independence was a black man named Crispus Attucks. A black man to die for the war. He was a fool. He was a fool. He got out there and got shot for white folks while his brothers were enslaved all over this country. He should have been getting his brothers together to take care of natural business. After the American Revolution was over and the white folk got their independence, they tapped the black people who fought on the head and gave them a medal and said, "Good work, nigger. Now get back to where you belong." So along came the Civil War. And the great emancipator Abraham Lincoln wouldn't even let us fight in the Civil War because he said we weren't fitting to fight. Frederick Douglass had to go and tell Lincoln to let us fight. And they only started to let us fight when the South was winning in segregated units and we fought in the back. We weren't satisfied. No, along came World War I. And they started to draft people, and they weren't drafting us. So our organization spoke up, draft us. We want to fight. We good Americans, yes. The slogan was, we're going to make the world safe for democracy. And while our grandfathers and our fathers lined up to make the world safe for democracy, and we didn't even know how to spell the word, and along came World War II. And our uncles went to Poland to fight in Poland, died trying to stop Hitler from killing white Polish people. And last summer, when we walked into Cicero, young Polish punks gonna throw rocks at us and call us niggers. Call us niggers. We weren't satisfied, no sir. We're gonna prove what good Americans we were. So the Korean War came along, and communism must be stopped at any price. And it was our blood that paid that price. And our uncles and brothers came back with one legs and one arms to walk into a store and have some foreigner slam the door in his face and say, "Nigger, get out my store." Yes, sir. In the Vietnam War, America is going to prove something to us. We ain't fighting. There's no need for us to go and bomb schools in Vietnam. We need to build schools in our ghettos. That's where we're going to be working. That's where we're going to be working. There is no need to go to Vietnam and shoot somebody who a hunky says is your enemy. We're going to shoot the cops who are shooting our black brothers in the back in this country. That's where we're going. There is no need for us to go anywhere and fight for democracy. We're working for our liberation, and it's going to be in this country. It's going to be in this country.
In Atlanta, where Carmichael's organization has its headquarters, a warning to Negro extremists from the editor of the Atlanta Constitution, Eugene Patterson, Pulitzer Prize winner and vice chairman of the Civil Rights Commission.
Mr. Patterson, in the columns you've been writing lately in the Atlanta Constitution, you seem to be warning the Negroes to not fall in the trap that Southern whites fell into, which is namely violence. What's motivated you?
I've been a little worried about the manifestations of black power, which indicate that staying within the democratic process is becoming less attractive to the Negro. I experienced this in the white South, where the difficulty of ending segregation led many whites into outside the democratic process and into violence. I think this led to their self-defeat I think it always will in this country.
Several years ago, you wrote a memorable editorial after the bombing of the Birmingham church in which 4 little girls were killed. And they found the shoe of one little girl, and the editorial was called "We Hold This Shoe," meaning that all of us who don't condemn violence in a way contributed to that. Is it possible that you might be writing one day the same kind of an editorial about Negroes who commit violence?
I would hope that the Negro in America would also remember those days, because the democratic process, the institutions of this country, I think, have been sufficient to give a start toward a better break in life for the American Negro, and I'm convinced will bring him full equality and justice ultimately. I recognize his reasons for being impatient. I'm not against impatience. I'm not against protest. I'm not against any group in America. Certainly the Negro who has so far to come. I'm not against this man demanding his rights and working toward them and bringing pressures to bear for them. But what I'm saying is that when you carry any group of Americans across the boundary that separates the democratic process from the jungle, when you threaten to burn a city or to shoot a man, when you threaten violence, either by implication or outright, then I think you're contributing to the defeat of whatever cause, moral or immoral, it is that you are attempting to champion.
I've heard so many definitions of black power in this country, but I'm not sure really what it is.
I think black power is probably pretty much what Dr. King was preaching 5 years ago, which is political unity. Get the vote. Use the vote to gain your rights. Develop pride in self. Develop a sense of history. Develop a willingness to solve your own problems and stop leaning so much on the white man. But I think also that you have to stay within certain bounds, that you have to realize that there is a point of diminishing return in most affairs in life, and this includes protest movements. And so in the time of hard work that lies ahead, I would like very much to see more of a dialogue within the Negro community itself on this issue of violence and nonviolence, racism and brotherhood. We are still too divided by race in this country, and I think every step we take to fragment it and divide it further is a step toward folly for the American people and the American institution. And I think every step we take toward integration, toward brotherhood, toward working together, toward absorbing the 20 million Negroes right into the great melting pot of this nation, then I think we're on the road toward the light.
But now some white youth are hung up with democracy because they're deluded and they think there really is such a thing as democracy in this country. And so they begin to stop the war on questions of morality, that it ain't right to kill. Now that's a lot of junk. It's not either right or wrong to kill. Killing is. The question is, who has the power to kill? That's all. A policeman in a black community is a licensed killer. He's a licensed killer. A black man attacking a policeman is a rioter. Yeah. That's because the black man don't have the license to kill. But when I die, I'm going to die with my boots on, and it's going to be in this country. It's going to be fighting for what I know is right, the liberation of black people. Nothing else. Nothing else. And what we're going to say across this country, from Muhammad Ali to the little black boy in Cardozo High School, hell no, we won't go.
Stokely Carmichael's voice is the most strident. But there are other voices of black power, and in a minute, we shall hear some of them.
This is where it began, the rural South. And here where it began, for the Negro, the problem remains. There's no ghetto here, just poverty. The worst kind of poverty. The kind of poverty that you won't find in even the most depressing ghettos of the North. The kind of poverty that makes you wonder, can this be the United States of America, the richest country in the world, in the year 1967? It is not just material poverty. There is also a poverty of the spirit, But it is changing. There is a quiet Negro revolution going on in states like Mississippi, in hundreds of hamlets, places that Southerners call wide places in the road, where you can see it, you can feel it, and you can hear it. The revolution is quiet. It is also armed. Churches have been bombed and burned too often.
Thank you very much. We don't believe in black power. That's the wrong word. That's a dirty word. But we believe in, it just happened that we have what? We just happen to accidentally have population power. And we're here because we're concerned about getting a share that's going to be fair and square with all of the citizens.
Charles Evers is the NAACP field director in Mississippi. The man who had the job before him was his brother, Medgar, killed in an ambush in the summer of 1963.
We're here to serve notice on all of those who have been so brutal to us in the past, that your day is gone. Because here in Jefferson County, we outnumber you any way you come. We got you outnumbered physically, we got you outnumbered mentally, we got you outnumbered economically, and about to outnumber you politically. We've got to vote right, walk right, and talk right, and let America know that we're not going to let nobody turn us around. To start off with, we let them know that we're going to take down that old Confederate statue we got standing down. Change all this. We're going to put a statue of a man who lived and died for all Americans. And somebody like maybe George Washington, or maybe Medgar Evers, or somebody who died that all men may be free.
Evers does not call for black power. Instead, he uses the power of blacks. In 5 counties of southwest Mississippi, where blacks outnumber whites. In Fayette, in Jefferson County, where Evers lives, he's built a shopping center, modest by white standards, but significant as a symbol of the growing Negro economic and political power in Mississippi. White politicians, aware of this growing power, openly seek Negro support in the August Democratic primary, in which Negro candidates are also running. Along with political power, the Negroes possess economic power, which can be dispensed or withheld. Evers is leading a boycott in nearby Natchez in an effort to get white merchants to hire more Negroes, and the city to grant greater Negro representation on the police force, the fire department, and the school board. The current boycott is already having its effect. Negro housing in some parts of Mississippi is unbelievably squalid, but even this is slowly changing. Credit, a commodity always difficult for Negroes to obtain, suddenly has become easier to come by. The Farmers Home Administration, an agency of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, is granting low-interest, long-term loans which are being used by Negroes to build decent homes. But the building is not just a matter of new homes, it's also a process of developing the Negro's abilities.
The steaming journalists of French Equatorial Africa welcomed a young German doctor and his wife. The year was 1913, and the pair had come to minister to the natives who had never known any other medical treatment that was given by the local witch doctors. They set up their...
As part of the effort of self-improvement, Negroes are taking advantage of literacy programs. This one conducted by STAR, a private, non-profit organization operating in Mississippi with funds from the Federal Poverty Program and encouraged by Charles Evers.
Europe and Africa.
All right, pause for a minute now. That is strife. Let's go again. Read again his label.
His label of love in the jungle was made doubly hard. Doubly hard by the outbreak of war and strife both in Europe and Africa.
At the site of the old slave block in Natchez on the Mississippi, where Negroes once were bought and sold, Charles Evers talked about the New South, which his power is creating.
We're now working strongly on our areas, on politics, getting them registered, getting them qualified, have voter education, voter registration, and the importance of the vote and what it can do. And this is already has changed the gubernatorial old pattern where there used to be nigger, nigger, nigger. Now they're talking about better highways and better education and more industries. So you see, this is what the politicians, Mississippi politicians are funny. They look at two things, the ballot and the dollar. And in this area, we control both.
Yeah, but you still go around with a gun. How much has really changed in Mississippi if you still go around with a gun in your car?
Well, I don't want you to get the impression that it's changed that much. Sure, I have a gun. I have two guns, to be exact. I have a rifle and a 38. And it's all for my protection. And I still feel I'm going to get it sooner or later anyway. But we had to stay on and continue to fight for the thing that we know is right. Because in every great movement, men have had to give their lives, and families have had to suffer. I'm going to live as long as I possibly can, and when I can't live any longer, then I'm going on in.
How do you feel about the situation with the war in Vietnam and some Negro leaders urging Negroes in Mississippi not to register, saying if you haven't got democracy in Mississippi, why should you go fight for it in Vietnam?
Well, I take a different stand, I guess, on that, too. I'm against the war in Vietnam. There's no question about it. I think all of us are. But I take another position, that America doesn't belong to the whites. It belongs to all of us. And if America is in Vietnam wrong, then we all are wrong. Then I feel that we all should defend our country, not the white man's country. It's our country. And anyone who takes a position that it's a white man's country, then he's been misled. I feel that we should go and fight for America in Vietnam, and we certainly should just come back and fight for it here. Now, you probably read what I've said, and I mean this, that I'm going to personally ask Negroes in Mississippi not to go to the Army, become June 1st. But it's not to defend our country in Vietnam, but it's because we have 90 selective service boards in Mississippi. And there's not a single Negro on one of them. So what we're saying is, unless Negroes are on the selective service board in Mississippi, we don't feel that it's fair for a little white board to send Negroes off to the Army.
What do you mean when you use the word black power?
If black power means what I have been told it means, that we're going to take over and mistreat the whites and abuse the whites as they have done us, then we are going to be just as guilty as the white man has been.
Did you feel this way before your brother was killed?
I'll admit that once upon a time that he and I both admired, and I still admire, Kenyatta. I'll admit that once upon a time he and I had planned to do the same type of thing that Kenyatta had done. Maybe you know his son, his oldest son is named Darrell Kenyatta. But we found out that that wasn't the way, and it wouldn't do, and that we couldn't win by taking an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. So we found
Mau Mau in Mississippi.
We had once thought about that, but as boys, youngsters, because we've been mistreated so badly, and we found that this wasn't the way, because even Kenyatta himself was defeated. And the reason why the whites are losing because they're wrong, and they can't survive this. So we're going to do unto others, we'll have them do unto us.
We're not going to have anyone who's going to do the white people wrong either. This is what's been wrong all the time. Them dirty rascals have treated us wrong, and now we don't get in and treat them wrong. So if we do right, it's going to hurt them bad enough. Oh, yeah, it's going to hurt them bad enough. Because they can't stand to do what's right. Now, maybe some of you don't understand why it's so important and why we run so many justice of peace. Those are the rascals who have done us so bad. Yeah. And we got to eliminate, we're going to build a foundation that you can't shake. So this time, let's bring to, for the first time in history that we know of, a woman, and most of all, a Negro woman, who's running for justice of the peace in District 2, Miss Lee. Come on up, Miss Lee. Give her a hand. Give her a hand. We're going to be right by our side, too, when they come in.
To Mr. Evans, our great leader, to our President, Mr. Allen, to the pulpit guests, officers of the board, and all who goes to make up this group. It is indeed a pleasure for me to stand before you tonight to run as a candidate for Justice of the Peace in District 2. I will give justice to one and all, regardless to the race, the creed, or the color. So let us stand together and let us vote for one another because this is the first time in life that we have had this opportunity. So since we have this opportunity, let us make the best of it. So I thank you.
Let's get it live.
We're gonna do what the Spirit said do. So what the Spirit said do, we're gonna do. Oh Lord, we're gonna do what the Spirit said do. We're gonna tell what the Spirit said do. We're gonna tell what the Spirit said do. Oh yeah, the Spirit said do. We're gonna tell what the Spirit said do. We're gonna do what Mr. Evans can do. We're gonna do what Mr. Evans can do. Oh yeah, the devil can do. We're gonna do what Mr. Evans can do. We're gonna die if the Spirit will die. We're gonna die if the Spirit will die. Oh yeah, if the Spirit will die. Oh Lord, we're gonna die if the Spirit will die.
In Atlanta, where he was raised as a minister's son, Dr. Martin Luther King seeks to pursue his dream of Negro equality through nonviolence. His leadership has been challenged, and so has his dream.
The black man in America is saying in substance that either you solve this problem and make freedom a reality, or you annihilate us. This is the choice that America has. Either exterminate us or make it right for us to live. And that it boils down to just that. So, and I don't think that America has degenerated to the point that it will seek to exterminate the Negro. So I think white America is going to eventually adjust to living creatively and brotherly with the Negro. But I do think that we will have to work a long time to get even the English language to the point of really recognizing the Negro or the black man as a man, because everything black in our language is considered low and worthless and inferior and degrading. If one would thumb through Roget's thesaurus, you would see 125 synonyms for black, and they are all negative and low and degrading, and 118 synonyms for white, and they're all...
All right. I don't mean to cut that off early. It's just that I don't want us to play the same video twice in one stream.
Oh, you're muted, dude.
Oh, god damn it.
You're muted.
How about now?
You are no longer muted.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for helping me out with that. All right, so yeah, I did not want to play the same video twice in one stream. So that's why I paused that, because we'll be getting to that in a little bit. That's not what I want to show. Oh my god. Hang on a second. I need to lower this. It's super loud.
Prankster, is that Finding Hitler documentary? Is that the one with Tim Kennedy in it? Tim Kennedy's like this MMA fighter slash I don't know, gun guy, military guy.
Wait, so you're telling me there's like a Finding Hitler History Channel documentary that like isn't conspiracy pilled?
I never even watched it because I assumed it wasn't. But the guy Tim Kennedy, he's kind of a douche, but he's kind of cool. He's like a very, he's like what you would say. He's kind of, that guy Jocko Willink that we talked about that one time where we watched all those like gag videos of him, and we watched him he lost in jiu-jitsu to the communist guy.
Yes.
He reminds me of that guy.
Oh, if it's hosted by a bunch of like ex-CIA guys, that's how you know that like they're being truthful and honest, and
We've supported a lot of ex-CIA members that were writing books about CIA activities on the stream, so who knows?
True. it really is a double-edged sword when it comes to ex-CIA guys.
You have to do. You can't just like read like one testimonial from an ex-CIA person and be like, oh, okay, this is exactly how things work, because like
Right.
you never know. That could be like, you know, the long con, double fake out.
It's like the guy that was like head of like what, the World Bank or the IMF, that was like, you know, I am ashamed to have ever had any part of this. Like, I say to you, everyone else that's part of this, you have blood on your hands.
I think that's a little bit more credible though, because I think that's like a little bit more of an above board organization to be a whistleblower on than the CIA.
Yeah.
Like the IMF, while being like incredibly devious,
Yeah.
is not like in the literal business of manufacturing dishonest propaganda like the CIA is, you know what I mean?
And yes, David, the Jocko show was the one you were on. I don't even know if it's actually playable on YouTube, because we watched so many different videos that either have to be muted or edited out in order for it not to be like blocked or partially blocked around the globe on YouTube.
The thing I'll say is that the one person, his name is Philip Agee, inside the company. The only reason that I rely on his a lot more is because he actually had to like leave the country and go to Cuba, and I think that like lends to his credibility a little bit. Like, you know, that would be a real extreme and successful operation to actually get like an ex-CIA active propagandist into Cuba and then start like distributing propaganda in Cuba.
All right, so, you know, welcome everybody. Good to see you, Sam. Good to see you, Frank. Good to see you, David.
If we went too hard, they had to censor us.
I think this is the first ever stream where Sin Chow is not first to
I was
comment.
actually a little concerned about that. When I saw that Sin Chow wasn't in there, I was like, I hope they're okay.
Oh, it might be that I had to shut down the stream real quickly because, like, I forgot to post that we're going live in, like, every single Discord and, like, make a tweet and everything else. And I was like, you know, fuck it. We're early enough that, like, I'm just going to stop the stream and then hit all this stuff. Otherwise, if I do that, then it's just going to show me, like, typing all that shit. Whatever. It's fine. You're all here now, right?
Sin Chow here? Are you with us?
No, I think that we lost them.
Damn.
I know.
Rest in peace.
You will be missed. Your presence is very missed if you wind up watching the VOD at some other point.
We're hanging your jersey in the rafters.
Mm-hmm.
We'll always be a part of the Subversive History family.
21 gun salute.
21 gun salute into a picture of Ronald Reagan.
Who, you know, I don't want to spoil it. So,
he dies, everybody.
Subversive History is a multimedia community project seeking to bring attention to the revolutionary struggles of the world's often unsung and frequently misunderstood sectors. These are the stories of the demonized, vilified, whitewashed, or otherwise forgotten campaigns against imperialism, colonialism, capitalist exploitation, and racial apartheid. The orthodoxy of Western hegemony has often labeled these dissidents as subversive. And these are the struggles we aim to illuminate.
Hell yeah. Everybody check out the new logo. We finally have a logo up.
Please compliment the logo. It was more expensive than you think.
Please clap.
Please clap.
Now hopefully we can sink some more money into a little kind of intro thing.
Yeah.
That's going to be the next project that requires money for the Subversive History branding.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna message Rob about like the music thing.
Yeah.
And I think I'm gonna message Unelectable Airwaves about like the video part.
Damn.
Hey, Potato King, how you doing?
Very fitting for a Potato King to be making
I do love a good Southwestern style hash.
Living up to their namesake.
They really are.
Bring me back into focus, please.
Just don't put your hand. Yeah, back more right angled.
Direct me to do a Nazi salute.
Yeah, like, don't do
more straight. Straight down more. Just get me canceled.
No.
All right. again, we're rapidly concluding The Sword and the Shield by Peniel Joseph. Today will be the second to last stream of this book. After today, we will have Sunday for the conclusion, and then we will begin. I just got a fresh copy, brand new in the mail, of The Great Father, which is the United States government and the American Indians. I literally just read that backwards off my stream because I didn't remember what it was, but
wild. Also, it's the abridged version, so we're not going to be reading all 1,300 pages of Volume 1 and 2.
So this will be before the larger Killing Hope project that we want to embark on. We both made a pledge to cover Indigenous history prior to more Cold World stuff, which is always a Cold War. I said Cold World, which is a band I also like.
Cold World.
Cold War stuff, which that we the little Western tankies that we are always want to just dive in on CIA operations during the Cold War. Best believe we will be doing that, but first we're going to familiarize ourselves with a little bit of that sweet underrated Indigenous history.
I mean, like Rick said, we can't get called out for it, and rightfully so, for knowing more about like the revolutions in Russia, China, Guatemala, and everywhere outside of the U.S. and not have the first goddamn
living on colonized land.
Yeah, while being colonizers living on colonized land and not know a goddamn thing about Indigenous history in the United States.
Yes. So we will be paying our
respects.
Our respects, yes.
It's the respectful thing to do, and I hope that chat, you come along, on the road with us for that one. I'm going to try and find a abridged a PDF of the abridged version for chat. It's a little bit more difficult. It's funny how easy it is to find the all 1,300 pages of the volume 1 and 2 one. But I promise, I'm gonna find it for you, and if not, I don't know, I guess follow along with us and show us up in chat, to be like, well, volume 1 and 2 had this little detail that the abridged version is missing. Losers.
Frankster says, Frankster, you are exactly right. It is a huge blind spot. I can just tell you, look across my bookshelf, and I have so much stuff about the international struggles of leftism, and very few. And then even in terms of domestic, I have so much about Black Power, civil rights, Du Bois, the Black Panthers, everything like that. But I have one very small book about Indigenous issues. Now I have one larger book that we will be reading.
Yeah, so trust me, it's gonna be a learning event for everybody involved, and hopefully we get a lot of there you go. Hopefully we get a lot of interaction, and I'm hoping you guys spread the word, because I would like for other leftists to also be learning about Indigenous history in the U.S. Like Frank says, it's a huge blind spot, and it should not be there. So, today we're starting The Sword and the Shield, Chapter 9, The Radical King, especially after the events of the last chapter and the loss of, his greatest, sparring partner, so to speak.
Yeah, in one sense, an adversary, but also his greatest equal, and, more of a complementary than he is adversarial, but also both adversarial and complementary at the same time in a very dialectical way.
Like Goku and Vegeta.
Exactly. You made that comparison, and I think it's almost perfect.
It really is.
Analogy for MLK and Malcolm X. Sadly, MLK was taken. Sadly, Malcolm X was taken from us during the last chapter. And now we are, Dr. King is continuing his struggle for civil rights. And we're picking things off here after the death of Malcolm, after the passage of the Civil Rights Act, but before the passage of the Voting Rights Act. So
Right.
that's where we're going to begin this chapter, is in the interim between those two massive pieces of civil rights legislation.
Right. And, you know, I'll save my more expansive comments for later, but just imagine what kind of, like, you know, what's the word I'm looking for here? Kind of like a teacher sort of figure he could be for a lot of the people we're going to be talking about later on in this chapter, had he, you know, continued to live and not been killed.
All right. So let's get things started here. The winter of Malcolm X's death marked the beginning of Martin Luther King's political radicalization. King had spent the previous decade expanding the boundaries of American democracy by turning once disruptive protests into part of the political mainstream. After Malcolm's death, King challenged the alliance between government and the civil rights movement he had helped to broker by making new demands on President Johnson's legislative and political agenda. In the beginning of the year, King tested the patience of a supportive White House by pressing hard for voting rights. By summer, he went further by defining rising civil unrest as a product of institutional racism and poverty that required far more material and political resources than ever imagined by the architects of the Great Society. So what we have here is, you know, this is, you know, it's good for us to be investigating or studying Martin Luther King's life after the death of Malcolm X, as well as after the passage of the Civil Rights Act, because, you know, mainstream sources always focus on the "I Have a Dream" speech, which happened before the Civil Rights Act was even passed, and Martin Luther King had years of political advocacy after that. So what was he talking about? What, you know, after the Civil Rights Bill was passed, what was his what was the aim of his activism at that point? And it was the alleviation of poverty and other forms of racial violence.
Oh wait, I gotta fix this. I gotta fix this real quick. Oh god damn.
What's happening?
I gotta change the title of the thing. What is this? The Radical King, right?
Radical King. Our Radical King.
Our Radical King. The struggle for voting rights found King back in Alabama, the state judged by the SCLC to offer the best and most potentially dramatic illustration of black disenfranchisement. The SCLC and SNCC both claimed Alabama as their territory. SNCC activists burrowed into Lowndes County, located in the buckle of Alabama's rural Black Belt, smack dab in the middle of Selma and Montgomery, cities where King and the SCLC enjoyed considerable networks. Lowndes contained a particularly brutal history of racial terror, serving as one of the main conduits of the convict lease system that virtually re-enslaved tens of thousands of black folk after the Civil War. King and John Lewis, the leaders of the SCLC and SNCC, vowed to work toward an operational unity that had been continuously stymied by disagreements over strategies, tactics, and hurt feelings caused by the considerable attention King's presence garnered wherever he went. SNCC staff working in the rural counties of Alabama remained dedicated to the slow, grinding, and tedious work of building a movement by helping local people organize. They considered King's decision to march 54 miles from Selma to Montgomery to highlight the disenfranchisement and police violence facing black voters as the kind of spectacle that Malcolm X had rejected with the March on Washington. Malcolm's presence in Alabama shortly before his death still lingered among some SNCC staff, especially in light of 26-year-old Jimmy Lee Jackson's death at the hands of Alabama state troopers during a melee in Selma following a nighttime demonstration in Marion, a town 27 miles northwest of the city.
So we got a lot of video content in this presentation, but it's a lot of very short videos. There's like a ton of videos, but they're all short. Because there's so much going on here in Selma and the surrounding events. So the first thing that was brought up is this, what is it, the convict lease program?
Yeah, I mean, like, basically, right, what did we talk about last time? Where after, you know, the slaves of the South were freed, right, they just instated that, like, you know, in the 13th Amendment that, like, slavery is illegal except as punishment for a crime. So all you got to do is just, like, you know, make things like vagrancy because you can't find a job, or homelessness because you can't find a job, or you're, like, you know, unable to rent or buy land or get a loan from a bank in order to, you know, buy a house, right? But land, right? You become criminalized in that sense, and so you are locked up into, like, you know, state penitentiary, and then you are rented out by that penitentiary, by that prison, as basically free labor.
Yeah, if you want to go forward a slide, there's a video I put in for it.
There we go.
The labor system that took shape in the late
There's our guy.
19th century
There's our guy.
developed coercive means to ensure that cotton remained king. It was called convict leasing. Get arrested on a minor charge or a trumped-up charge, you could find yourself locked up and then hired out to a corporation bidding on inmate labor. The pipeline from prisons to profits in this country has deep roots.
The aftermath of slavery was in some ways worse than slavery itself. Unlike before, when someone who owned you, driving you too hard was counterproductive because you would lose your investment, convict leasing was different. You could get them cheaper, and if you actually drove them to death, there was more where that came from.
In the 13th Amendment, which ends the institution of slavery, of course, there is a loophole. Convicts who have been convicted of a crime, they actually can be forced to work for free.
In Alabama in 1850, 99% of the people who were incarcerated were white. In Alabama by the 1880s, 85% of the people incarcerated were black. So we could have a debate about how many of those black people were actually innocent, or we could have a conversation about the use of the criminal justice system to target both the innocent and the guilty alike. That continues all the way to the present, where even today, about just under 40% of the nation's prisoners are black, and yet the African American population is about 13%. They are snatching up bodies everywhere to fuel this system.
The idea in which more money can be made out of their incarceration.
By the way, you know who Kimberly Crenshaw is, right? She's actually, like, one of the biggest intellectuals in terms of advancing, like, work around intersectionality, you know? I'm not sure if she came up with the term, but she's a very big, like, you know, intellectual figure in terms of researching things around.
Bell Hooks came up with that.
Yeah, I think Bell Hooks may have been the person that came up with it, but Kimberly Crenshaw is a very big, you know, figure in that.
Incarceration is still very much part of our criminal justice system.
Have you ever heard, and I'm not sure if I particularly subscribe to this opinion, but have you ever heard that, like, the transition to wage labor was almost preferable to plantation owners than maintaining slavery, kind of like for things that they were saying on there, where, like, you know, wage labor can be discarded at any moment. You don't have to buy the slaves or house them or feed them. You can just, like, essentially pay someone, like, far, far below what it even takes for someone to survive, and in this case, even rent out slave labor, and you don't even have to go through the expensive process of purchasing the slaves and housing them in a way.
I think that's gonna be determined by, you know, who you're saying that's good for. If it's good,
the plantation owners,
right? But, like, are we talking about, like, small plantation owners? You know, kind of like mom and pop style plantation owners, or are we talking about like very established, already very wealthy plantation owners that, like, you know, can continue to thrive in this new environment under, like, you know, wage labor rather than, you know, slave?
I think there's also a pretty glaring issue with that theory in that why didn't they just do it? You know what I mean? Like, why would they be reluctant to let go of their slaves if there was a more profitable system that they could have implemented?
Right. Why have the Confederacy? Why have, a civil war?
It seems like that. It says you minimized your application.
Oh, God damn it. Come on, man. Really?
What happened?
I don't know what is going on with OBS, but it just kind of froze on me. What the hell? Small hiccup, everybody. Small hiccup. One moment. One moment. Oh, that's why. So we just happen to stream every time Discord decides, hey, you know what you need right now? You need an update. But that's okay. Because that's okay. Because I've gotten so good at this. So good. So good. There we go. It's like nothing happened at all. Look at that. Look at that. Not even an F.
Nothing to see here, folks.
Not even an F. All right?
There was an F. But
no.
hit us with the F.
Fucking Discord tried to fucking, break us. All right? No. Not even one F. All right? You just...
We gained people while we were down. Like 6 people joined this stream while we were down. So they try to hold us back, and we just expand.
Exactly. Not even an F. Not one F. All right? So what the fuck were we talking about?
Let's just go to the next slide. I think actually the next slide is also a video. I just wanted to do a quick little video on the convict leasing program that was happening in Alabama at that time. Okay, never mind. It wasn't. Okay. So over the first 2 months of that year, King led a number of demonstrations in Selma between fundraising efforts. His church duties at Ebenezer and bouts of ill health that doctors attributed to stress, tensions that were exacerbated by constant barrage of credible death threats in Alabama and elsewhere. Against this backdrop, King approved, but did not participate in, the planned demonstration originating from Brown Chapel AME in Selma, where Malcolm X had spoken the month before and destined for the state capital of Montgomery. 600 demonstrators, led by SCLC aide Hosea Williams and SNCC chairman John Lewis, marched from Brown AME through Broad Street, Selma's main thoroughfare, before turning left to ascend the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Alabama state troopers in blue uniforms spread across the 4-lane Highway 80 to block the procession. They were joined by more than a dozen of Sheriff Jim Clark's possemen, riding on horseback and armed with cattle prods. As Lewis and Williams advanced toward the east side of the bridge, they were given 2 minutes to disperse over a bullhorn wielded by Major John Cloud, the commander of the state troopers. A minute later, all hell broke loose. So go forward.
I've never seen a plural of possemen. Posse.
This is just some background on the Selma situation.
Let me just get rid of that.
The Selma to Montgomery March is the culmination of a long struggle for voting rights that triggers a national outcry. Bloody Sunday is beamed across the nation and across the world as the forces in Alabama trying to turn back the idea that black people wanted to participate in the political process.
Now we had the right to march from Selma to Montgomery and to be protected. The governor, the sheriff department, and others would not interfere.
The march starts in Selma, crosses the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and makes it the 54 miles up through Lowndes County.
Down Highway 80, all the way to Montgomery. And off time, we would stop to rest. Some brought food. It meant that some people were so determined to assist us.
I was 11 years old in the 6th grade, and my 6th grade class, we cleaned up at the campsite. My class was part of the cleanup crew. They camped out overnight for 4 different nights. They had a crew that would dismantle the tents, pack them up and move them up to the next campsite. They had a crew that did the same thing with the kitchen, the food, utensils and all that.
What was that, like a UN flag or?
I think so. Which is ironic.
Yeah.
Also, there were whites who were determined.
You see that?
Yeah.
Follow
Communist ML King.
those persons who were white who were participating in the march.
But during the course of this campaign, even before the march is finished, Lyndon Baines Johnson takes to the airwaves before a joint session of Congress.
Lyndon
and
Big
announces
Chungus
he's gonna put
Johnson.
before Congress a voting rights bill.
It was a
Oh,
great
just let him as
feeling
king.
of accomplishment, knowing that we had done something that we felt would be beneficial to all persons, regardless of their color, whether they were black, white, red, or yellow.
At least he didn't say purple.
You felt that
Yeah.
something great was being accomplished. You just felt that that was an enormous
You know who that
happiness,
is,
an
right?
enormous joy that you had finally arrived, that even though
No.
you had finally
That-
arrived,
that-
even though joy that you had
Oh my God. I'm pretty certain that's Harry Belafonte.
Oh, nice. Okay.
happiness and an enormous joy that you had finally arrived, that even though all those things had gone against you, you was finally there.
Moving down Dexter Avenue in Montgomery. To the very right marched Jose Williams, holding his daughter. I marched next to him. Mrs. King marched next to me. Dr. King marched next to his wife. Dr. Ralph Bunch, the first African-American Nobel Peace Prize winner, marched next to him. And to his right marched Mrs. Abernathy. To her right marched her husband, Ralph Abernathy. And to his right marched John Lewis, who today is United States coming from Georgia.
The subtitles are fucking killing me.
Why?
It just said rapper Eminem, and I was just like,
Hey man, he was there.
YouTube, do better.
Yeah.
Please do better. All right.
And also, you know who else can do better? HBO cannot put the hard R on the N word every time that like a guy in Baltimore or a kid in Baltimore. Somebody down at HBO should just like maybe not put the hard R's on every single one of those. You know what I mean? They can kind of, you know.
There's a difference.
That's my opinion. That was my opinion. I don't think it's necessary to do that. But what do I know?
United States coming from Georgia.
There's some like stubborn writer in HBO. That's how it's spelled.
Yeah. No, I mean, like they you know that all subtitles are like pretty much like done by a company. Yeah. No, they send it to a person. A person writes those things.
Yeah, I thought that was a little weird.
On the way to the Capitol to hear Dr. King make that speech that day.
It culminates with Martin Luther King's iconic speech at the steps of the state capitol, where he asks, "How long? Not long."
I sat on that platform, looked out over that sea of humanity. I don't know how many thousand people were there, but I had a feeling of great triumph and victory. For now, all persons, regardless of their color, would have a right to participate in the political process that govern their lives.
All right. So, you know, obviously we've done extensive coverage on all like the major battlegrounds of the civil rights movement. We did Montgomery during the
But
bus
some of the
boycott.
Montgomery marches-
Now we're back in the Montgomery area. Alabama is fucked up. And so is
Yeah.
Mississippi. I don't know if you know this. We just continually keep getting into these places. Like, you remember the Freedom Rides where that bus got firebombed?
Yep.
That was Alabama.
Yep.
Montgomery.
Yep.
Twice. Birmingham. Fucked up. Now we're in Selma. You know, like, Alabama was not a fucking chill place to be during the 60s.
I mean, like, if you ask Nelson from Dixieland of the Proletariat, it probably can't be described as, like, chill now either.
Right.
Like it's been some time. It's been like 60 years, and
it's running. Its teammate in that unchill nature is Mississippi, because we're all over Jackson, we're all over Philadelphia, Mississippi, which is ridiculous that there's a Philadelphia, Mississippi. And we're going to see that things aren't so chill there today either. Both of these places, vestiges of racism remain prominent. All right, a little bit more here. Did I even put this in the right place? I'm not sure.
I don't know, bud.
All right, go ahead, just play it. It's fine.
Nope, no subtitles. Let me just.
This is just interesting footage here of like the colorized footage of the Montgomery situation, the second Montgomery situation, not to be confused with the first Montgomery situation with Rosa Parks.
Yes, I did, David. Have you ever seen the Lingua Franca music video?
No.
I need to show you that before the end of the stream.
Okay.
Dr. King, how are things shaping up now for tomorrow? Things are shaping up beautifully. We have people coming in from all over the country. I suspect that we will have representatives from almost every state in the Union, and naturally a large number of people from the state of Alabama. And we hope to see, and we plan to see, the greatest witness for freedom ever taken place, that has ever taken place on the steps of the capital of any state in the South. And this whole march adds drama to this total thrust. Last Sunday, more than 8,000 of us started on a mighty walk from Selma, Alabama. They told us we wouldn't get here. There were those who said that we would get here only over their dead.
That's because it is Dave.
Talk.
Yeah, we should just not watch this footage of the march or Martin Luther King speaking, because democracy now is lib.
I didn't say that, Patrick.
Today I want to tell the city of Selma. Tell them, Doctor. Today I want to say to the state of Alabama. Yes, sir. Today I want to say to the people of America and the nations of the world that we are not about to turn around. Yes, sir. We are on the move now. Yes, sir. Yes, we are on the move, and no wave of racism can stop us. Yes, sir. The burning of our churches will not deter us. Yes, sir. The bombing of our
Is that Bernie
homes
Sanders?
will not dissuade us. Yes, sir. The beating
Every white person at one of these rallies is Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
That's just a fact.
Yes.
The wanton release of their known murderers will not discourage us. We're on the move now. Yes, sir. Like an idea whose time has come. Yes, sir. Not even the marching of mighty armies can halt us. Yes, sir. We're moving to the land of freedom. Yes, sir. I know you're asking today, how long will it take? Somebody's asking, how long will prejudice blind the visions of men? I come to say to you this afternoon, however difficult the moment, yes, sir, however frustrating the hour, it will not be long, because truth crushed earth will rise again. Yes, sir. How long? Not long. Yes, sir. Because no lie can live forever. Yes, sir. How long? Not long. How long? Because you shall reap what you sow. Yes, sir. How long? Not long. How long? Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. Yes, yet that scaffold sways the future. Yes. Behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. How long? Not long. Because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Yes, how long? Not long. Not long. Because mine eye eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Yes, sir.
He's trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored.
Yes, sir.
He's loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword.
Yes, sir.
His truth is marching on.
Yes, sir.
He has sounded forth the trumpet that shall never call retreat. He is sifting out the hearts of men before his judgment seat. Oh, be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet. Our God is marching on. Glory, hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on.
Yeah, very, very famous Martin Luther King speech, and where he says the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. And what we saw there.
I wish it would just bend already.
Yeah, will you just bend? So the events that we saw happening with SNCC and their march was known as Bloody Sunday, which brings us to this point in the chapter.
And yeah, and to David's comment, reactionaries stop making Sunday's bloody challenge impossible difficulty. It's always funny that like the reactionary side always tries to seem like the more faithful, more like, you know, devout in their religion, you know, and for the most part, Sunday is the holy day, and yet it continues to happen on those days where there just violence is just they have no other option. Right. Bloody Sunday galvanized voting right efforts in Selma, turning King's latest mobilization campaign into an international news story. ABC News broadcast footage of the afternoon of violence on Highway 80 later that evening, preempting a screening of Judgment at Nuremberg, an award-winning film depicting the aftermath of racial genocide in Europe. On Tuesday, King led a group of 2,000 determined marchers, whose hopes of traveling beyond the area of Sunday's violence were thwarted by fresh threats from law enforcement. King's decision to march just short of the hundreds of Alabama state troopers prevented a second violent confrontation but came at great cost to his reputation. SNCC activists, while still not officially endorsing the march, felt that King should have pressed on no matter what the obstacle. The Tuesday turnaround incensed SNCC staff, who channeled Malcolm X's voice in criticizing King's behavior as a betrayal of local people committed to securing the vote.
Something that follows King for some reason, you know, it was back in Montgomery. It was a thing also where members of SNCC and other, I think, CORE also criticized King for like not putting his body on the line, not putting his money where his mouth is, etc. And I guess this kind of just adds to a little bit of that reputation, which I think is a little bit erroneous because I think he is, you know, he's been arrested multiple times at this point.
Yeah.
But I guess it was a little bit, you know, the Tuesday turnaround because he, you know, avoided law enforcement.
Right.
Kind of added that type of reputation that was happening there. I guess there was more extreme elements that were like, you're not, you know, radical, you're not diving head first enough.
I think the other thing to remember that like this is less than a year after Malcolm, you know, has been murdered, and it's been noted in previous chapters that SNCC at this point is, you know, way more into Malcolm than they are King.
So
you know,
maybe the death of Malcolm even added to some kind of like a resentment, not directly, but just in a way where they feel robbed of Malcolm. That maybe that gets channeled into a greater criticism of King.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a little bit more about Bloody Sunday that I found here that I thought was good to watch. I gotta pee.
Go for it.
With horses, they came with nightsticks, and I was standing and people were running because they were beating me. I did not run, so he hit me at the base of my neck, and I became unconscious.
Photos of a woman tear-gassed and beaten unconscious by Alabama state troopers are among the most iconic images of the civil rights movement. The woman was Amelia Boynton Robinson, a leader of the campaign for black voting rights in Selma, Alabama, and the first black woman to seek a seat in the U.S. Congress from that state. She had helped organize a demonstration on March 7, 1965, to protest the killing of a young African-American church deacon named Jimmy Lee Jackson by an Alabama state trooper, and to continue the fight for voting rights. The Selma establishment was known to be among the most egregious in barring blacks from the polls.
If your grandpa's any of these men, he's a bastard.
But what started as a peaceful protest ended with unspeakable violence. The veteran activist clearly recalls the events of that day, and she recently recounted them to middle school students in Los Angeles.
Under Dr. King, we decided that what we need to do is to have a bill that would let Negroes become registered voters. We were going to march from Selma, Alabama, which is on the river bridge, to Montgomery. I was near the front at the beginning. They came with horses. They came with nightsticks. And I was standing and people were running because they were beating me. And then he hit me on my shoulder. I did not run, so he hit me at the base of my neck. And I became unconscious. They drug me off of the highway. And there I lay, I don't know how long. But somebody said to one of the state troopers, "She's dead." So they reported it to Jim Clark, who's the sheriff. And he said, "If she's dead, let her alone and let the busters eat."
Images of the atrocities that day sparked shock and outrage across the globe. When Boynton Robinson became aware of the magnitude of the malfeasance that occurred on Bloody Sunday, it intensified her resolve.
So it made my determination to do better and go farther.
Boynton Robinson was present at the White House when President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act into law in August 1965. The episode became known as Bloody Sunday. It sparked worldwide outrage and helped garner support for the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. As the 50th anniversary of the event approaches on March 7th, Boynton Robinson is not bitter. Instead, she remains resolute in her belief that although she almost died fighting for freedom, the struggle was worthwhile.
After Bloody Sunday, people began to wake up, and those who have arisen because of our Bloody Sunday, they have excelled.
Despite her age, Boynton Robinson's activism is far from done. The matriarch of the civil rights movement believes there is still a long way to go. She appealed to today's generation to embrace the lessons of the struggle and not take their vote for granted.
And I am still determined that these young people will realize that a voteless people is a hopeless people. If we don't register and don't fight for your rights, then we are hopeless, whether it's an individual or a group of people. You're no citizen at all.
Little testimonial there from someone that was assaulted by police at Bloody Sunday in Selma. Just to kind of give us a little bit more of a personal feel of what was going on there.
I'm not gonna lie, that video fucked me up.
Yeah, it's very sad.
Namely just because of like how like it's been 60 fucking years and not a whole lot has changed at all. And you know, which is why like I get it that there's a lot of like really like radical quote unquote like leftist people that'll be like, you know, oh, voting is stupid, voting does nothing or whatever, like, you know, stuff like that. I'm not gonna tell like, you know, like especially black people in the South that like, you know, oh, you know, your vote doesn't matter, you know what I mean? Nor am I going to tell them that like, oh, you're just not voting hard enough or something stupid and silly like that. Do you know what I mean? Like what I'm getting at?
Go to India and tell the CPIM that electoral politics is pointless.
Right.
Tell them that they should be like the Naxalites out in the jungle who, you know, I have some degree of admiration for the Naxalites also, but, you know, CPIM, you know, I think that they make a very significant point for, you know, what possibly could happen through like an electoral path and a popular political platform that really does, you know, I guess the word influence the community to support them.
Yeah, that's like the one thing that like I don't see with a lot of like the leftist, you know, or, you know, quasi-socialist or socialist, like, you know, organizations that label themselves as parties here in the US is that like I don't see the same level as like, you know, what's the phrase that you just used? I guess like influence within the community, or at least integration like within the community, right? Where they do try to use, you know, a lot of like electoral strategy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'd say that, you know, and it goes just into like, you know, the classic, you know, cliche of Marxism, and is that it depends on your material conditions. Does your materialist conditions call for a guerrilla warfare? In some cases it does. You know what I mean? If you are in a absolutely like militarized and terrorized position, and the way to fight back against that is through violent means. But also if you are in a position where you know, electoral appeal will you know, result in some amount of you know, material advances as well as, you know, popular support, I mean, you would be you would be mistaken to not capitalize on that.
Right. If you were within like a marginalized community here in the US, right? You know, like, and you have tried all means of, you know, defending your very livelihood and existence through electoral means, right? Who am I to denounce you or, you know, to castigate you for turning towards, you know, means of, you know, the guerrilla to, like, you know, to defend yourself and your communities.
Correct. All right, so moving forward. Expressions of outrage, grief, and support for the movement poured into Selma from all parts of the country, including the White House. Thousands of Americans descended upon the city, including white liberals, upset over the images of racial violence and against civil rights activists. The violence in Selma pushed Lyndon Johnson to accelerate his plans to send voting rights legislation to Congress. The death of James Reeb, a white minister from Boston who had traveled to Selma to support the movement only to be murdered by racist vigilantes after the Tuesday demonstration, forced Johnson's hand, as did the sight of more than 1,000 protesters outside the White House. Reeb's death in Selma, like the killing of white activists Mickey Schwerner and Andrew Goodman in Mississippi the previous summer, inspired national headlines, allowing the movement once again to leverage the human tragedy of white victims into the national moment of political reckoning. Johnson addressed the controversy at a press conference staged at the White House Rose Garden on Saturday, March 13th. What happened in Selma was an American tragedy, he observed. Johnson said the violence represented a crucible through which the United States would better perfect the Union, strengthen democracy, and in so doing, reveal the heart and the purpose and the meaning of America itself. He suggested that racism undermined the grandeur of the American experiment and violence sullied the moral aspirations of all its citizens. It is wrong to do violence to peaceful citizens in the streets of their town, said the president. It is wrong to deny Americans the right to vote. It is wrong to deny any person full equality because of the color of his skin. So what we see here is that, kind of like Malcolm X was saying as well, white America and white liberals really get their jimmies rustled when the racial violence, the violence is not exclusively levied against black citizens, but once white citizens start dying, then everybody starts realizing that this is an actual issue, regardless of the fact that lynchings had been happening for a century at this point, and then we don't need to highlight what happened prior to the century. We're all well aware of that. So still to this day, after the Civil Rights Laws Pact, we're seeing violence not only against black people, but also against white people who support them. So, and also I wanted to include these two videos. They're very short, but this situation with James Reeb, but also about the two individuals that were murdered during Freedom Summer, which I felt it was strange that this book didn't really focus on too much. So we're going to go into that now. So first one is for James Reeb.
And
they're both from this. Good, yeah.
I just wanted to add one thing real quick. It's funny that you said that, like, white people's gym jams generally get rustled when white kids finally start dying, right? Yeah. Reminds me of, like, the epidemic that both you and I survived.
Opioid epidemic, correct.
Right, that, like, it's not until, like, kids of our complexion, start falling dead, due to, whatever substance, that, like, people start, like, giving a shit about it. Meanwhile, like, generations of, children of color, have been suffering, from and because of that. And, right. Again, 60 years later, not much has changed. It's gonna be a rough one.
Pause it real quick.
Yeah.
Both of these videos are from the two videos that we're about to watch are both from this YouTube channel called the Jim Crow Museum.
Yeah.
They really do, I think, like a really good job of explaining these situations, and they have really great footage. But for some reason, the guys that they use to narrate it are super like awkward. It feels like you're in like a PBS special or like something that you watch in a life skills class.
Love it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, but the content's great.
I feel like maybe we should take a page out of their book and just get more awkward,
Yeah,
just
watch how these guys are.
All right.
Just up our awkward level.
James Reeb was at home with his wife in Boston, March 7, 1965. As the
have like the most listless. Like, I'm not knocking you, dude, Anthony. Like,
I was so close to not using this. Once I started watching it, I was like, all right, this ain't the video. But once you get into it, it's excellent. It actually is. But
Anthony, I'm not hating on your material. I haven't even fucking watched this yet. I have not pre-watched this at all. I'm not hating it all. But like, have like a cup of coffee. Maybe like just loosen up a little, play a little Daft Punk or something before you start recording.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just come on, man.
Is portrayed armed state troopers and local police violently attacking voting rights protesters as they march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. This attack, which is often referred to as Bloody Sunday, led Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to issue a request that clergy members of all races and denominations from all around the country go to Selma to stand up and protest against the brutality of Jim Crow segregation.
Our city and our county has been subjected to the greatest pressures I think any community in the country has had to withstand. We've had in our area here outside agitation groups of all levels. We've had Martin Luther King.
Holy shit!
Yeah. This is what we're dealing with in Alabama.
Bro, dude, fuck the outside agitators part, which, by the way, like, what does that remind you of?
Yeah.
But like, you don't slip up that fucking hard unless,
he did
like,
that on purpose. That was purposeful. He did that on purpose. That
right. He look, there's one of two options.
Slip.
There's no, right.
I'm
like,
a mask off racist, and I'm
right.
going to call him a slur in my press conference.
Jesus fucking Christ.
That's what that was. Yeah.
Martin Luther King We have had...
It's time for us to say to these men that if you don't do something about it, we will have no alternative.
Who does that sound like?
But to
Who does that sound like?
Listen, go back. Let him play out. Go back and let him play this whole thing out, because you're going to hear a very extreme Martin Luther King right here, far more extreme than you've ever heard him. And this is what they talk about. They say, after you kill Malcolm, after we don't see the results that we want to see from the Civil Rights Act, and after the Vietnam War is just a gross atrocity of inhumanity, you're going to see Martin Luther King become more and more like, yo, we're trying our best here, but come on. Go ahead.
But to engage in broader and more drastic forms of civil disobedience in order to bring the attention of the nation to this whole issue in Selma, Alabama.
I was thinking it reminded me of
Reed
Castro.
was aware of the danger involved in answering the call of Dr. King.
Sorry.
He decided in the afternoon on Monday that he needed to go to Selma to join the protests. James Reed's life mission was to help the less fortunate and to promote peace and tolerance. He was a Unitarian minister and also worked for the American Friends Service Committee, a longtime advocate for social justice. Reed left his wife and 4 children at home and headed south on a late-night flight for what was intended to only be a short trip. Unfortunately, Reed would never make it home again. On Tuesday, March night, Reed joined a large group of marchers who, under the leadership of Dr. King, walked from Brown's Chapel in Selma to the same spot at the far end of the Edmund Pettus Bridge where the police had brutally attacked a group of protesters only 2 days before. After holding a prayer service at the site of the attack, the marchers turned around and returned to the chapel. That evening, Reed joined 2 other ministers, Clark Olson and Orloff Miller, for dinner at a local black-owned restaurant, the only restaurant that would serve the marchers. As they left, they noticed 4 white men approaching, yelling racial slurs. The ministers tried to avoid a confrontation, but were attacked from behind. Reed was hit on the side of the head.
He's like, community service says I have to do these videos in addition to my IOP. Can you sign my paper? Can you sign my paper, please? And say I did this and I have to go take a drug test when I'm done here.
Holy shit!
Can you sign my paper, please? I got here at 7.
Oh my fucking god! It's like the same energy, but it's just like, I don't know. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt and be
I'm just being a hater. I'm just joking.
I'm not trying not to be a hater, but it's just like it is just like it's going, like, he works there, obviously, right? And it says at the beginning that, like,
I don't know if you saw, he has a degree in like Latin American studies or something like that.
Right. So it's like, is this just draining? Is this like so soul draining for you because of how like dark and harrowing all this history is? Like,
my probation officer said I had to do this for community service.
Dude, like the same guy that like brings the list up like in the middle, like the meeting's already started, and he's bringing the list up to like the table, be like, yo, I need you to sign this. Like speaker's already started. They're in the middle of talking. He's just walking up and like right from outside, be like, I need you to sign this.
Head with a club, knocking him to the ground. He suffered a severely fractured skull and massive brain damage. His injuries proved to be fatal. The other ministers were punched and kicked, but they averted serious injury. After being kept alive by life support for 2 days, Reed passed away on the evening of March 11th. The 4 men who attacked Reed and the other ministers were arrested by the local sheriff the day after the attack on charges of assault with the intent to commit murder. After Reed died, the charges were changed to murder. In April, a grand jury indicted 3 of the men, brothers William and Naaman O'Neill Hoggle and Elmer Cook, but they dropped the charges against the 4th man, R.B. Kelly. At the end of their trial in December 1965, all 3 men were found not guilty by an all-white jury, despite the testimony of Clark Olson and Orloff Miller. The death of James Reed brought national attention to the voting rights struggle. While many white Americans ignored the violence against countless black citizens, the killing of a white minister from the North was viewed as unacceptable. Even President Lyndon Johnson got involved by arranging flights to and from Selma for Reeb's wife and father, and by going before Congress in a televised address 4 days after Reeb's death to call for a strengthened voting rights bill. In this address, President Johnson used the civil rights phrase, "We shall overcome."
And we shall overcome.
Congress subsequently passed the Voting Rights Act, and President Johnson signed it into law in August.
We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand today.
All right, I'm subscribing to this channel under our official channel because I feel fucking guilty. Fucking just dragging on this dude.
Because now, if you looked on that wall, the other two were
Schwerner
and Andrew Goodman.
Yeah.
So go to the next one. At first, I was like, dude, I'm not going to use the same Jim Crow museum thing, but I watched the video and it's also great, but it has a different guy with like the same energy. I don't know what they're doing over there, but I support them though.
Yeah, we're only gonna have time to film these at 5 to 6 o'clock. That's before the museum opens. We can't have you filming while the people are in there. And he's just like,
okay.
Yeah, okay.
I'll be there. This one is wild.
Hi, I'm Neil Baumgartner, one of the
Jesus
facilitators
Christ.
here at the Jim Crow Museum of Racist Memorabilia. We're going to share some of the stories of the people.
I get it that like maybe the last video with the other guy was this kind of like, you know what, maybe if we just have him moving around, that'll make it better, you know, like
so much worse. The movements are so awkward. Like
I mean, David, I'm not trying to say like, oh, there's not much to get jazzed up about, like, you know, when you're walking through
we've
the
been
gym.
talking about Jim Crow for fucking the past month. And
Right.
I feel like we've been pretty jazzy.
I feel like, you know, all right, and I obviously understand, like, this is very serious, and obviously, like, the way we've covered it maybe at times has been inappropriate. I'm not gonna lie. All right? Yes, I'll cop to that. But, like, you know, you know what? Never mind, David. You know what? Fucking... All right, fucking, I hate this. I hate everything about this. All right, we're just gonna play the video.
People whose lives are commemorated on the cloud of witnesses here in the museum. This cloud of witnesses contains the images and names of various martyrs from the civil rights era. It's by no means a full collection of everybody who gave their lives, but it does provide an opportunity for us to discuss different individuals who made a great sacrifice to gain civil rights in this country. We want to share these stories to provide a little bit of insight into the effects of Jim Crow, of racism, and of the hatred that gripped this country for so long.
I will say he did a really good job of not making it look like he's looking at cue cards.
No, he did. We give credit where it's due.
I'm not a hater. I think they did great. I love this channel.
I kept both of them in there. I think they're great. Go subscribe to the Jim Crow Museum.
On June 21st, 1964, at the beginning of what was to be known as Freedom Summer, 3 civil rights workers, Michael Henry Schwerner, James Earl Chaney, and Andrew Goodman, lost their lives to Klan violence in what would be a case that gained national attention for the past 40 years. A couple weeks prior to their death, on Memorial Day in 1964, Schwerner and Chaney had arranged to set up a freedom school at Mount Zion Church in nearby Longdale. Klan members, thinking that they were going to find Schwerner and Chaney at a business meeting at the church, surrounded the church, beat some of the church members, and burned the church. Unfortunately for the Klan, Schwerner and Chaney were not there at the time. They were actually in Ohio at a national conference that was teaching people.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I'm being pedantic here, but he said fortunately for the Klan, they weren't there. What does that mean? Oh, maybe he said unfortunately. I don't know. Just keep going.
People how to take part in this Freedom Summer program. When word got to Ohio, Schwerner and Cheney jumped in their Corps car and headed back down to Mississippi along with Andrew Goodman, who they had just recruited to come and help. As they were heading back to the Corps office in Meridian, they were pulled over and arrested by Neshoba County Deputy Sheriff Cecil Price, who happened to be a member of the local Klan. Deputy Price jailed the 3 civil rights workers, and while they were in jail, he contacted Edgar Ray Killen. The details of exactly what happened that afternoon are unclear. What was clear is that around 10 p.m., the 3 young men were released from jail. As they departed from the county jail in Philadelphia, Mississippi, and drove back towards Meridian, they were once again pulled over by Deputy Price along with 2 carloads of Klansmen. The 3 men were put into the police car, driven to a remote location, and when they were driven to that location, Michael Schwerner and Andrew Goodman were both killed by close-range shots fired by Klansman Wayne Roberts. James Earl Cheney was savagely beaten and tortured prior to him being killed. The Klansmen took their bodies and buried them in an earthen dam on another Klansman's property, where the bodies lay undiscovered for 6 weeks. The disappearance of the 3 men was highly controversial in the area. Some Mississippi legislators and powers thought that it was all a hoax.
Jim, we got 3 kids missing down there. What can I do about it?
Well, I don't know. I don't believe there's 3 missing. Now, I'm going to tell you why I don't think there's a damn thing to it. They were put in jail in Philadelphia, in East Mississippi, right next to John Stennis's home county. And they were going to Meridian. There's not a Ku Klux Klan in that area. There's not a citizens council in that area. There's no organized white man in that area. So that's why I think it's a publicity stunt.
I believe them jokers planned and sitting off up in New York laughing at us Mississippi folks.
Well, I believe it's a big publicity hoax, but if they're dead, I feel like they asked for it.
6 weeks later, when they did find the bodies, it was confirmed that these 3 young men had been murdered, had been brutally murdered, and their bodies had been disposed of.
Yes, Mr. President. They found those 3 bodies 6 miles southwest of Philadelphia, Mississippi. 6 miles west from where they last seen. They don't know that these are the bodies. They moved them into Jackson to identify them. They're off Route 21. It's right near the site of a new dam that's been built. They have every reason to believe they are the bodies. So call the families and tell them that there'll be an announcement in the next 10 or 15 minutes. And we'll, as soon as we get proper identification, let them know further.
Despite all of the evidence that was gained during the investigation, the state of Mississippi refused to press any murder charges against any of the perpetrators of the crime. 3 years later, in 1967, the federal government pressed charges against 18 individuals for violating the civil rights of Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman. There was no federal murder statute under which to try the men who had killed them, so this was the best that they could do. After a trial, 7 men, including Deputy Price and Sam Bowers, the Imperial Wizard, who had ordered Schwerner's elimination, and Wayne Roberts, who had been the triggerman that killed Schwerner and Goodman, triggermen, were found guilty. 7 others were acquitted. 1, the charges were all dropped. And 3, there was a hung jury, including for Edgar Ray Killen, with one of the holdout jurors saying she could never convict a preacher. After the trial, the judge, who was also a known segregationist, said that they killed 1 nigger, 1 Jew, and a white guy. I gave them all what I thought they deserved. The memory of the killings and what happened in Mississippi haunted the members of the communities in Neshoba County and the greater area of Mississippi for over 40 years. People were seeking justice. As a small measure of justice, in 2005, 41 years after the murders, Edgar Ray Killen was finally tried, convicted, and sentenced to 3 20-year sentences for the killings of Michael Schwerner, James Chaney, and Andrew Goodman. To this date, he is the only perpetrator of the crimes who was convicted or even tried of any murder charges in the killing.
The roadside, I cried alone, all by myself. I cried alone by myself. I stood on the roadside and cried alone by myself. I stood on the
This is the
roadside
type
and
of shit
cried
that we're dealing with in Mississippi. Just absolutely horrific, and complicity at all levels of government, society, from citizens to police officers to judges. Everyone is working in a conspiracy to murder civil rights activists and black people trying to vote or otherwise exist. I don't think it'd be great. Things would be great. Shout out to Jim Crow Museum. Check out their YouTube channel.
Please subscribe to Jim Crow Museum. I'm sorry that these videos are fucking me up, man.
Yeah, it's very grim, a very grim chapter of history here.
Okay. Do you want me to read this one?
Yeah, this one's you.
An early morning court appearance and the obligation to deliver James Reeb's 2 p.m. eulogy forced King to promise the president that he would be listening to your message on TV with great interest and appreciation. In perhaps the most powerful speech of his presidency, Johnson, during a March 15th special address to Congress, characterized the black citizens gathered in Selma as long-suffering men and women who peacefully protested the denial of their rights as Americans. The president's vivid description recognized Selma as part of a long, unbroken chain of patriotism that stretched back to the Founding Fathers and historic battles waged in Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts, during the American Revolution. Johnson compared black demonstrators in Selma to the soldiers in the Battle of Appomattox, which signaled the end of the Civil War, making a claim for the civil rights struggle as the natural heir to Reconstruction's unfinished legacy. At stake for all Americans, the president observed, was nothing less than the destiny of democracy, a political system that Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. had publicly debated over the previous decade. Racial discrimination, Johnson argued, lay bare the secret heart of America itself. He boiled the struggles for racial justice down to their root political and moral essence, reflected in the American creed: to right wrong, to do justice, to serve man. By confronting the crisis in Selma, Johnson suggested the nation would rediscover its moral purpose as liberty's surest guardian for all Americans.
Again, we see all of this, absolutely like dastardly and despicable crimes happening in Selma and the surrounding area, as well as in Mississippi. And this is having a very large influence on Lyndon B. Johnson, who is doing all the right things as a politician. When he gets in front of a microphone and he addresses these issues, he does sound very good. If you want to move forward one slide, we have a couple minutes of
He's saying all the right things.
Exactly. And that's the thing that I always want to bring up here is that sometimes, actually oftentimes, a politician, a president, especially of the United States, when they're speaking into a microphone in front of a camera, will say a lot of things that sound very good, but you always need to investigate what's happening behind the scenes also, because this is also the man that is continuing to allow wiretaps and surveillance and FBI monitoring of Martin Luther King. He's also the man that did everything he could to try to stop Fannie Lou Hamer, and the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party members from their seat at the Democratic table. He was trying to hush that up as best as he could.
I think it was the Mississippi Democratic Freedom Party.
Yeah. So go ahead. This is a couple minutes of his little speech here, which, I give him his points that he deserves for having like a progressive political platform, more so than previous presidents. But also, you do need to acknowledge, this is the man that intensified the Vietnam War to one of the most grisly human rights atrocities in history.
Right. Going completely contradictory to the direction that his predecessor JFK wanted to do it. Zero boots on the ground.
Yeah, well, that's also the guy that did the Bay of
Even
Pigs.
if we pass this bill,
JFK's nose isn't clean
the
either.
battle will not be over. What
I'll
happened
never
in
let a slick
Selma as
Irishman
part of a
fucking
far
wrap me up
larger
in his
movement which
enchantress.
reaches into every section and state of America. It is the effort of American Negroes to secure for themselves the full blessings of American life. Their cause must be our cause too. Because it's not just Negroes, but really it's all of us who must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice. And we shall overcome. As a man whose roots go deeply into Southern soil, I know how agonizing racial feelings are. I know how difficult it is to reshape the attitudes and the structure of our society. But a century has passed, more than 100 years, since the Negro was freed. And he is not fully freed tonight. It was more than 100 years ago that Abraham Lincoln, a great president of another party, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. But emancipation is a proclamation and not a fact. A century has passed, more than 100 years, since equality was promised. And yet the Negro is not equal. A century has passed since the day of promise, and the promise is unkept. The time of justice has now come. And I tell you that I believe sincerely that no force can hold it back. It is right in the eyes of man and God that it should come. And when it does, I think that day will brighten the lives of every American.
We're always happy white people.
So very happy.
We're very pleased.
For Negroes are not the only victims. How many white children have gone uneducated? How many white families have lived in stark poverty? How many white lives have been scarred by fear because we've wasted our energy and our substance to maintain the barriers of hatred and terror?
Terror.
And so I say to all of you here and to all in the nation tonight, that those who appeal to you to hold on to the past do so at the cost of denying you your future. This great, rich, restless country can offer opportunity and education and hope to all black and white, all north and south, sharecropper and city dweller. These are the enemies. Poverty, ignorance, disease. They are our enemies, not our fellow man, not our neighbor. And these enemies too, poverty, disease, and ignorance, we shall overcome.
So, again, mannerism so much like W. Yeah, that's true, Sinjal. He does definitely have some like G-dub vibes.
I mean,
on there.
they were both Texan.
Oh, wow. They're both, okay, he's from Texas too? Yeah, they both talk very similarly.
Yeah, give me 1 second though. I just gotta go to the bathroom real quick.
Okay, yeah. Do you want me to read this or wait?
Read it.
All right. Okay, so we see Lyndon Johnson recognizing the turmoil in the South, leaning deeper into it in his political position to be the candidate of civil rights, as well as he was mentioning also this like war on poverty platform that he's also going on. You know, when he started saying it's not just black kids, look at all the white kids that don't receive education, so on and so forth. So this is where Johnson, you know, tries to embark on a massive campaign of civil rights and anti-poverty legislation. He's not necessarily successful in that quest, but he does pay lip service to it at least. And also the one thing that I do like to point out here is that, you know, this is after the civil rights law has passed, and even the president of the United States is also saying, even to this day, the Negro is not free. So this is recognized by JFK. It's recognized by Lyndon Johnson. It's recognized by Martin Luther King. It's recognized, you know, very broadly at this point. But still, you know, when we read back to this, they act as though the 1964 Civil Rights Act was Martin Luther King's dream realized, and you know, it was all progress from this point forward. When all of the major people involved with it at this point are saying that this is not the progress that we were looking for. This is not the dream that I envisioned, and our work here is not done. So to get into the next slide here, civil rights, according to King, look toward the universal through the particular experiences of black struggle. He reminded the audience to never forget that civil rights struggle had led to a broad war on poverty concept, which ultimately will benefit more whites than Negroes. King felt increasingly comfortable publicly defining the movement as one without limits, despite critics and supporters who viewed him as only qualified to discuss racial matters. Instead, King implored the audience to reimagine the nation's entire democratic project by recognizing that when civil rights activists demonstrated around the nation, they represented the best example of citizenship that America had ever witnessed. Then King crept gingerly into the topic of Vietnam, not yet the political maelstrom it would become, but sensitive enough for the SCLC to decline offering an official policy on the subject. We must work to end the war in Vietnam, King pleaded. He talked about the inadequacies in our poverty program, hinting at a fundamental contradiction in the Great Society's dual efforts of ending poverty and escalating the war. He cited war, racism, and poverty as the three areas where there is a moral and spiritual progress. He quipped that although it is nice to have an integrated lunch counter, he didn't want to find the milk served at the counter suffering from nuclear radiation. So we even hear him echoing a little bit of Malcolm X in this trivializing tone to the integrated lunch counter. And you know, this is what Malcolm X said, like, I don't give a fuck about having a cup of coffee at an integrated lunch counter. You think that's what our problem is that I can't have a fucking cup of coffee down at the Woolworths?
At the racism fucking diner?
At the racism department store? You know, and you know, Martin Luther King is also kind of acknowledging it. Like this battle, this dream that I have, this vision that I have does not end with a desegregated lunch counter.
Right.
This is a much broader thing. We have racism, we have war, and we have poverty. And you were away, but this is what I'm saying is that, you know, in the 21st century, we look back at the civil rights era as like Martin Luther King had a dream, and then in 1964, that dream was realized. And you know, everyone was happy, and from that point, we've moved forward. But President Johnson said the Negro's not free. JFK announced this on his civil rights address. Martin Luther King is saying this. Malcolm X is saying this. We have SNCC, we have Stokely. We have everybody saying that this is not what, you know, that's great and all. I'm glad there's a little piece of legislation. I'm glad I can sit at this lunch counter legally. But this is not dream realized.
Oh, I was.
And we can't look back as though it is.
Sebs is beating me to it. I was literally about to bring up, like, Black Lives Matter started as a movement under Obama. Even after electing the first visibly black president.
The Ferguson stuff happened all under Obama, right?
Yeah.
Michael Brown? That was Obama.
Yes.
Trayvon Martin, that was Obama.
I think it was Baltimore or some shit. You remember when, like, you know, you had like white people saying, "Oh, they're burning the city down."
The CVS. Somebody think of the CVS.
Somebody think of the CVS. Baltimore.
Yeah, we're in post-racism America right now.
Doug, think of the CVS, Doug.
All right.
On August 5th, 1965, Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act in the same room where Abraham Lincoln, 104 years earlier, had signed the Confiscation Act, which helped pave the way for slavery's emancipation and freed enslaved black people during the Confederate serving in the Confederate armies. Johnson signed a bill that contained no such half measures. Martin Luther King Jr., Roy Wilkins, James Farmer, and Rosa Parks were among the civil rights leaders that listened to Johnson discuss voting rights as a triumph for freedom as huge as any victory that has ever been won on any battlefield. But King would have less than a week to bask in the achievement. Just 5 days later, unrest erupted in Watts, a predominantly black neighborhood in Los Angeles made up of working, lower, and middle-class residents. Police brutality against local blacks suspected of criminal activity sparked the violence, a pattern that echoed the civil disturbances that previous year in Harlem, Brooklyn, and Rochester, New York, and like literally throughout the last 3 years.
Right. Here we have again another piece of legislation passed. Great, voting rights have been passed. We have it on the books. And then what does it say? 5 days later, you have police brutality leading to a massive riot in Los Angeles. Again, the legislation is great. I think legislation is progress. At least when you have some kind of a federal recognition of the inequalities, but this does not remedy the systemic issues which precipitate all of these issues. I hate to use the word issues twice.
I think that what Malcolm was getting at, right, especially in retrospect at this point, was that black people in America need to have economic advancement first, right? And then decide whether or not they want to desegregate, alongside this vicious, violent, population that surrounds them.
And not to diminish everything that we've watched so far, but just to kind of quote Malcolm's perspective, I feel like he kind of thinks that this whole the integration thing is almost like the dog asking to come in the house. You know what I mean? The house of white supremacy, and to be allowed to lay at the feet of the. You know what I mean? We don't want to just be allowed into the white man's house and be able to use his facilities and things like that. We want our own. Autonomy and self-determination, which comes through economic advancement. And then we can decide how much we want to, be involved in that structure that they've already created over there.
Right. What's the point of me being allowed to, go into the diner if I can't afford anything in there?
Right. Yeah. Or exactly what I get to go down to downtown and go to the nice restaurant, but then I got to go back and live in the ghetto that is over policed and everything like this. Yeah.
I get to be harassed by the police the entire time, right?
Exactly.
Because
criminalized for petty charges, trumped up charges, and but Martin Luther King, Malcolm X saw the writing on the wall long ago with this, but Martin Luther King is also realizing this. You know what I mean? Because he's the one at the front line doing everything right, the right way. And he's not seeing the things that he needs to see remedied. So he becomes increasingly a little bit closer to Malcolm in his perspective.
I think, again, it comes down to the analyses between these two men were very different because of the lived experience that Malcolm grew up in poverty. Malcolm knew poverty firsthand. King, however, grew up very middle class, right? And I feel like his analysis of what Malcolm was saying, I think was also just poisoned by the fact that there's all this other, like, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, there's a lot of hot takes around what did Malcolm actually mean that I'm sure that King was also reading at the time or hearing from other people.
This video is nice. It's just because it's like, I like whenever this legislation stuff gets passed, it's nice to have just like a little breakdown of what it actually is. This one actually has a nice little summary of like a lot of the things we went over too. And if you haven't been here like lingering on every one of our words every time we stream, because it takes us a month to go through a book, this gives you a nice little synopsis of some of the things that we go over here.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna pee again
All right.
because I drank too many liquids.
It's all good. Nobody needs to redeem hydrate, all right?
Despite the ratification of the 15th Amendment in 1870 that protected citizens' right to vote based on race and previous condition of servitude, things like poll taxes, literacy tests, and the grandfather clause were still allowed due to the Supreme Court's poor interpretation of the amendment. In United States v. Reese, William Garner, an African American, was denied the right to vote by two election inspectors by the name of Hiram Reese and Matthew Fauci. Reese and Fauci said that Garner refused to pay the poll tax, but in reality, Garner tried to pay the tax but was refused by the tax collector. When this case eventually went to the Supreme Court, they determined that the language of the Enforcement Act of 1870 was too broad and that the 15th Amendment did not ban things like poll taxes and literacy tests. Over the decades, civil rights activists advocated against racial discrimination such as segregation, voter suppression laws, etc. The civil rights movement started to see major victories starting in the 1950s when the Supreme Court ruled in favor for civil rights with cases like Brown v. Board of Education. In short, after several nonviolent protests and sit-ins, the movement continued to gain national attention. On June 11, 1963, Kennedy proposed the Civil Rights Act of 1963, with no luck of it getting passed in the Rules Committee. In the same year, over 100,000 people marched on Washington to advocate for both civil and economic rights of African Americans. There, Martin Luther King gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Unfortunately, in November of the same year, JFK was assassinated. With LBJ now being president and being the former Senate Majority Leader, he was able to get the bill passed in the House and passed in the Senate after a 54-day-long filibuster. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 banned discrimination based on sex and race and helped in the effort of desegregating schools. However, despite the amount of good the Civil Rights Act of 1964 did, it did not stop literacy tests and other means of voter suppression. With voter suppression in the South still alive, the civil rights protests continued. After the 1964 elections, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference led by Martin Luther King Jr. and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee pushed for action from the federal government to protect racial minorities' voting rights. Starting in January 1965, civil rights leaders held demonstrations in Selma, Alabama. Unfortunately, on March 7, 1965, one of the marches were violently interrupted by police. Anywhere between 525 to 600 civil rights marchers walked out of Selma from the southeast on US Highway 80. After the protesters crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, they met a wall of state troopers and county posse. John Cloud, the commanding officer, ordered the marchers to return home. Reverend Hosea Williams attempted to talk to the officer, but he made it very clear that there was nothing to discuss. Law enforcement then proceeded to knock many of the demonstrators down and beating them with nightsticks. Tear gas was fired and troopers...
Do you see who that is right there?
Is that Stokely?
I'm absolutely certain that's Stokely.
He was there. He was there.
Charged on horseback into the crowd. Americans looked at the event in shock and horror once images of the event got out to the media. 17 of the demonstrators were hospitalized while 50 others were treated for less serious injuries. This horrible event became known as Bloody Sunday. 8 days after the event, President Lyndon Johnson sent a voting rights bill to Congress. Despite some hurdles, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 passed the Senate on May 26th and the House of Representatives on July 9th. Thanks to the Voting Rights Act of 1965, literacy tests are now banned, and now there can be federal oversight of voter registration in places that have less than 50% of a non-white unregistered voter population. Another part of the bill did allow the U.S. Attorney General to investigate how poll taxes are used in state and local elections. However, poll taxes were banned on the state and local level in 1966. Election minute out.
I do, however, think that, like, we should have some kind of voting thing regarding, like, you know, do you believe in QAnon? Like, you know, That kind of shit. So, Sam suggested this video, right?
Sure.
This
Yeah,
TikTok.
TikTok, yeah.
Do you know the Conscious Lee?
No.
Oh, dude, he is fucking
I'm not on
tastic. I hear you. I think he might have videos on YouTube as well, but the Conscious Lee, great content creator. I love him. Can't get enough of him.
No black person could have asked for integration because, given the history of the country, given our history of black people in this country, integration was the last thing we were talking about. We were all integrated. We could tell that from the colors of our skins. You know, that was not the question. We've been integrated for 400 years, at least. The question was to liberate the children so that you didn't have to explain to a child why he couldn't have a drink here or go to the bathroom there. In short, to be treated like everybody else in this republic. That was the demand. And if you remember, there were people then, a long time ago, who said, I'm not sure I want to be integrated into a burning house. So, we are accused now.
That was James Baldwin, one of the greatest intellects this country has ever produced. And you heard what he said about integration? No black person asked for integration. It was the last thing we're talking about. We've already been integrated. Perhaps when we talk about this country being built on the backs of our ancestors, you don't recognize that we had to be integrated for us to do that, correct? See, the illusion of inclusion is so integrated in our social fabric, people don't even recognize it. We say, stop exterminating us like bugs in the streets. They say, how about we integrate your federal holiday into Juneteenth? In conclusion, this country loves to romanticize those MLK quotes, but never the one about the fear and the integration of the burning house. I wonder why.
He must not have gotten into that one yet, because that was directly from Martin Luther King that said that we don't want to integrate into a burning house. But that
was it MLK he was quoting, or was it Malcolm?
Well, it sounds like that's what he said. I feel I may have integrated my people into a burning house. Martin Luther King said this.
Christ.
I'm trying to figure out when, because this I guarantee you that it would have been covered in this book if it
well, I feel like we're in what, 1965 or 66? 65.
We're in 65 right now. We're about to be in 66.
So I
think
sure
it comes
that
in 67, but yeah. So it's like this is definitely on the precipice of that coming up. But that was a great video, and also James Baldwin is just so incredibly based for his entire role, and like very unsung role in the civil rights. Like no other like diplomatic force just traversed between Malcolm's camp. And when I say camp, I don't mean just like ideology, but like literal relations and respected dialogues with the person, just like the Malcolm camp, the Martin camp. Then he's with Bobby Kennedy, like trying to tell him like when Bobby Kennedy says like I need a group of cool black people to help me understand black stuff.
Yeah. And he's a gay. He's a member of the LGBTQIA plus community.
Yes. Shout out James Baldwin. Just hearing him speak about all these issues and being able to just channel like the unity between all these things is just incredible.
Yeah. Yes, Sam. Also, if you have not seen I Am Not Your Negro, please watch it. Please watch it. It's definitely worth it. It's an excellent movie about like the life and legacy of James Baldwin.
Watched a small snippet of it when they were talking about Harry. When they were talking about that meeting, we used a small snippet of that document.
Yeah.
So as you saw, this was a couple days after Lyndon B. Johnson. Now, this is the actual news reporting of that time, so you have to take everything with a grain of salt that these people are saying, because the media generally has extremely racist interpretations of what's happening in these like police incidents. So I tried finding a good retrospective video, but they were all very long, and this will do.
6 days of rioting in a Negro section of Los Angeles left behind scenes reminiscent of war-torn cities. More than 100 square blocks were decimated by fire and looters, and few buildings were left intact. Firemen were harassed by snipers and brick-throwing hoodlums as they attempted to control the fires, many of which were left to burn themselves out. As the National Guard moved in to restore comparative calm, the losses by fire alone were put at $200 million. No attempt has yet been made to estimate the losses suffered at the hands of the looters who stole everything from liquor to playpens. Firemen were later issued flak suits of bulletproof mesh to protect them from snipers who continued to shoot from rooftops. Nearly 3,000 were arrested, and authorities had to open abandoned jails to house those netted by the police. It took the appearance of 14,000 troops to bring an end to what both Negro and white leaders called insurrection by hoodlums. Civil rights leaders were quick to deplore the unbridled lawlessness, and Martin Luther King vowed to do all in his power to prevent a recurrence in Los Angeles or anywhere. An uneasy calm prevails in what is known as the Watts area of the city. A curfew was put into effect, and the entire section declared off limits to all but residents. The people who live here are suffering great hardship with no grocery, drug, or other service stores able to operate.
Shit. Welcome, Raiders from Left Flank Vets. We are Subversive History. Oh my God. That's a lot of you. That's a whole lot of you. So, we are currently reading The Sword and the Shield by Peniel E. Joseph about the radical history of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. We are currently on chapter 9. We are past the point of the early years of Malcolm X coming from the prison, coming from the NOI, and becoming like, an international voice for black voices in America. We are past the point of his assassination. We are past the point of Martin Luther King making his way and cutting his chops through literally just being like I'm trying to think. I'm like, oh my God, this is so many people.
So, we followed everything, through the initial stages, their background biographies, their ascent to political prominence. We went through the Montgomery bus boycotts. We went through the Birmingham incident. We went through the incidents in St. Augustine. And now we just went past the Selma March. And now we're up to the Watts riots that came just after Lyndon B. Johnson passed the Voting Rights Act. So now you're picking up right as we are examining the Watts riots in 1965 and Martin Luther King's response to the Watts riots, which caused a increasing disparity between him and Lyndon B. Johnson and made him a little bit more of a political pariah than he was prior to the Watts riots.
Yeah, sadly, unelectable airwaves, you did miss Cairo. He, went on Hajj in, the Middle East or Western Asia, if you're, actually looking at a map. And he, drifted even further away from the NOI and ultimately left the NOI, the Nation of Islam, and began his own organization that was snubbed out along with him by...
Unelectable airwaves might be talking about like the attempted assassination in Cairo. I think they brought that up in chat recently, but I'm not 100% positive.
Yes. Western Asia, indeed, because, what you could really call Europe, the peninsula of Asia.
Don't get Johnny started on Europe.
I may get started on Europe. It is literally just, a very loud, pissy peninsula of Asia. But, all of these things are constructs. None of it's actually fucking real. Right. Borders are all made up by, long dead old white men, that are no longer in power. So, yeah, we are Subversive History. Basically, what we do is we read the books that you always said you were going to read for you, with you, if you'd like. You can, if you're on your computer, you can scroll down a little bit, and you'll have a link to our Discord. You can hop in our Discord, and normally we offer PDF for you to read along so that, you can tell us about the parts that we missed or that you found more interesting than whatever the hell it is we're talking about. And I believe after this book, we're going to be talking about The Great Father, which is about indigenous history and the government of the United States. And, I think like the one thing that every American leftist really lacks is good history on indigenous relations within the U.S., and we're here to fucking rectify that. So please follow. If you want to subscribe, please do if you have the money to do it. We're not going to lose the roof over our heads if you don't, but if you do feel like supporting us, it really helps us out, and hopefully we can make this stream even more high-end. We can get all the bells and whistles that every other streamer seems to be able to do that, we're still trying to wrap our heads around. I'm trying to think, is there anything that I missed?
I think you covered it pretty good. You could read the mission statement if you want.
All right, yeah. Pat is very, very proud of his mission statement, and I owe it to him to read it because we have not worked on this yet, but we do plan in the future to work on not just making a Twitch stream, but also traveling abroad. Pat is very, very well traveled, right? And, he's an expert at being able to hop on a plane and going to faraway lands. And, we're very good at networking and managing to find people, right, of these revolutionary backgrounds and interviewing them. And we hope to do that in the future. But for now, Subversive History is a multimedia community project seeking to bring attention to the revolutionary struggle of the world's often unsung and frequently misunderstood sectors. These are the stories of the demonized, vilified, whitewashed, or otherwise forgotten campaigns against imperialism, colonialism, capitalist exploitation, and racial apartheid. The orthodoxy of Western hegemony has often labeled these dissidents as subversive. And these are the struggles that we aim to illuminate. And that's what we're doing by going over the radical history of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, not this whitewashed.
Wilco asked, what specifically made you decide to cover these two leaders? So what made us want to do that is that we were coming into Black History Month, and Black History Month is a time where pundits across the political spectrum, whether they be liberals or even the most hardline conservatives, people like Ben Shapiro will, erroneously toed around Martin Luther King and the I Have a Dream speech without giving any kind of realistic portrayal of what he believed, how he thought about remedying racial inequalities, how he felt about poverty, how he felt about the Vietnam War, his views on capitalism. So we decided to, offer something as an alternative to that, to give a more true and sincere portrayal of Dr. King as well as Malcolm X. And as we said in our mission statement, we look to, illustrate and highlight individuals that are either vilified or whitewashed, and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King are two prime examples of someone who is A, vilified in terms of Malcolm, and B, whitewashed in terms of Dr. King.
I mean, Ross, you already know what I'm going to clap back at you with. Even if communism is responsible for killing 100 million, how many more millions is capitalism responsible for in the same manner?
Yeah, and maybe one day we will read El Nino famines and Victorian Holocausts by Mike Davis, which really goes into how the expansion of capitalism and wrenching, third world communities into cash crop production led to between 100 and 2 million people dying just in the 19th to 20th century alone.
So we are very much into reading. A lot of this is actually just coming directly out of the book. Our opinions are secondary, right? A lot of the times what we'll do is we'll actually have slides literally taking pages right out of the book, right? For you to read along with us, right? And we will have little videos like this historical archived AP video from that time, right? We'll deep dive on the characters and the events of all of these historical, things that we'll investigate, through these books. And, also if you want to join the Discord, right, you can even recommend us books that you would like to see us read.
Duck Under. Yeah, we generally talk about the books probably about a week or so in advance, or even longer, because it takes us about a month to really It takes about a month or so to go through it. So we generally have the book picked out, and we'll let them know, just like we're letting them know right now, that our next book will be The Great Father, which is the United States government and American Indians. A book that was recommended to us by Rick from the Decolonized Buffalo podcast.
Yes. What do y'all think of my man, John McIntyre? Wait, what? What are you talking about? Let me go back up in chat here. Oh, okay. Here, hang on a second. Let me fucking look at this before I fucking post it in chat. Oh. What is this? Please watch it. Please watch it. I am not your Negro. No, I am not. I am not. I'm not doing that. I am not your Negro. God damn it, Matt.
They got you. They got you. All right,
Finally got me.
You want to get back into the presentation?
Wilco, it's not what it looks like. I swear to God, it's so out of context. You can't. No. No. No.
The James Baldwin. It's the James Baldwin documentary. Again, these are just some like historical footage of the 1965 block riots, 6 days after a police brutality incident. This is after the Voting Act was passed by Lyndon Johnson.
Right, and after the Voting Act by Lyndon Johnson, how many individuals was it? It was like, I don't even know if it's stated, but the point is that, like, an incident, with police violence occurred.
It was 3 individuals.
3 individuals, they were harassed by the cops in LA, started off the Watts. It's basically the same shit that happened like fucking 3 years ago, right? And literally, like, you can copy and paste the same exact fucking words out of the news, right? From 1965 into, 2021, and it's the same shit.
A special task force of 1,000 policemen stays on the alert as the thousands of guardsmen patrol an area of 35 square
Scorpion
miles.
Squad.
The outbreak spread to other Southern California cities, but were quickly quelled. In Los Angeles, authorities say they are now ready to move with dispatch if lawlessness breaks out anew. The riots in Los Angeles have written a sorrowful page in American history.
A sorrowful page. So yeah.
So that's what's going on in Watts. The uprising fulfilled Malcolm X's grim prediction that political rebellions would soon grip the nation. The Los Angeles riot exposed deep fissures within the civil rights movement, the limits of the Great Society, and the depths of racial injustice. The scale of the Watts rebellion hardened civil rights opponents while radicalizing the advocates of Malcolm X's struggle for black dignity. Critics interpreted the waves of burning cars, burglarized stores, and chaos as criminal acts of lawlessness. Reports of sniper fire, widespread destruction of property, and violence were further heightened by the response of Los Angeles Mayor Sam Yorty and Police Chief William Parker, who encouraged anxious white homeowners to purchase guns while dismissing allegations of police brutality raised by civil rights leaders and local activists. So again, we see the predictions and opinions of Malcolm X continued to be validated as this story plays out. Unfortunately, Malcolm X was not alive at this point to see his correct perspectives, but they passed the Civil Rights Act of '64, they passed the Voting Rights Act of '65, and we still have these situations playing out, which prove that these legislative matters are not, these legislative band-aids are not going to be the remedy for racial issues in the United States that a lot of people put them out to be, and still act as though they are today.
Right. It's not as if any of these acts of legislation stop anything about police harassing people. It does not stop the terror from things like the Ku Klux Klan that, like, honestly, even to this fucking day, right? It's not like they're being stamped out. It's not like, Klan fucking, it's not like the Klan, right, is being tracked down and investigated and dismantled, and all of those people are being arrested in the same way that, like, the U.S. Very quickly, mounted the investigation into every mosque across America after 9/11. Meanwhile, like, the Klan is responsible for how many lynchings, how many, murders, throughout, like, its history. Whatever. Sounding history's drumbeat, Johnson described black impoverishment as losing ground every day, in desperate need of a massive political and financial commitment. That's right, you said it right there, replied King to the president's declaration of being ahead of the curve on racial justice. King told Johnson that Los Angeles required an immediate infusion of anti-poverty funds. The country's got to stand up and support what I'm doing, said Johnson, asking King to reinforce his leadership on issues of racial and economic justice. We've got to have some of these housing programs. We've got to get rid of these ghettos. We've got to get these children out from where the rats eat on them at night, Johnson said, getting himself worked up. He complained in detail about how the Senate's cuts to his poverty bill had stymied his efforts to get a handle on urban poverty and potential riots. Like, it's 60 fucking years later. What is different?
Yeah, and as much as we can criticize Johnson, and we definitely do, you know, he is identifying, and so is Dr. Martin Luther King, that this is a issue of poverty. And to his credit, Johnson did try to, you know, run on a campaign platform of this war on poverty. But as this says, it was stymied by the Senate's cuts to his poverty bill. And he is looking at that being something that is directly motivating this type of racial unrest in Watts and Los Angeles. That these people need better housing. You have kids living with rats and so on and so forth. So Dr. King and Lyndon Johnson are both in agreement that this is an issue of poverty, and that a simple Voting Rights Act or being able to get, you know, a cup of coffee at a desegregated lunch counter does not fix these deep fissures in society.
You can literally copy and paste this shit directly onto the butter build back better fucking thing that Biden tried to do. What?
The butter battle bash?
The butter battle bash that Biden tried to do.
The Dr. Seuss war between those who buttered the top of their toast versus the bottom of their toast?
Yes. You can literally copy and paste the same exact shit because, like, yeah, Biden says all the right things for the most part, except when he's trying to, you know, use the abbreviated term for renegotiate. Like, you know, into what Johnson is trying to do here. Big Chunkus Johnson is trying to alleviate poverty. Build back butter bottom, whatever the fuck it is, right? Butter bottom is like the same fucking thing. Trying to reinvest in infrastructure and healthcare and all these other fucking things to alleviate poverty. And yet somehow, every single fucking time, these things are stymied, right? By senators, congressmen, or any other fucking excuse.
OpenGL, the U.S. has never done to the Klan what has been done to groups like, say, the Move Collective when Philadelphia dropped a bomb on its own people and burned down multiple city blocks. I'm currently a resident of Philadelphia, so I'm well aware of the Move situation. But yes, the United States has never applied the same level of scrutiny to something like the Ku Klux Klan as it did for the Black Panthers or the Move organization.
And it's even worse today. They just say access to affordability, and we see you, we hear you, etc. We'll wear the kente cloth. We'll fucking kneel down with you. We'll do this and fucking that. Because
whatever nominal lip service that we can pay that doesn't damage our pockets, that isn't us putting any actual real skin in the game, that's what we'll gladly do.
Right. So now our options are between, like, you know, people that will purely
you want a rainbow on the drone strike machine? Boom,
yeah, we'll put the rainbow flag on the Hellfire missile.
On the Predator
drone. You know, as we bomb your community. Or you know, our other option is, you know, some unhinged psychopathic white lady that, you know, is ranting and raving about, like, Jewish space lasers and how every trans person is, like, you know, grooming their fucking kids or some shit.
Position ourselves as the progressive alternative to that.
Yes.
Congratulations. You're very lucky to have us.
Man, if only the bar wasn't so fucking high for the Democratic Party today.
Yes, that is a very let them eat cake type of situation.
So, do you want to read this one?
No, this is you.
All right. Months later, in the Beyond the Los Angeles Riots, an essay published in the Saturday Review, King wrote that Watts exposed the imperfections in the civil rights movement and misguided white racial policy in American cities. He announced bold plans to confront the poverty in black urban communities that Malcolm X had spent his entire life addressing. Without mentioning Los Angeles Mayor Sam Yorty or New York Mayor Robert F. Wagner by name, King criticized big city politicians who lacked statesmanship and compassion on race matters, but nonetheless personally welcomed me to their cities and lavished King with praise until he pressed them about local race relations. That's another thing that, like, you know, for all the new chatters that haven't been here for all the other chapters that we've done previously, by the end of even Malcolm X's life, Malcolm and King agreed on much more than they disagreed on, and actually, like, you know, looked at each other in the same way that Goku and Vegeta look at each other in later seasons, where, you know, there was a little bit of sparring every once in a while, but there was nothing but love between the two of them.
Yeah. And what you're seeing here play out right here in this dynamic on the heels of Malcolm X's death and after the two major pieces of civil rights legislation were passed, you see the darling of the, you know, American liberal, or the, you know, the poster boy of the acceptable civil rights, civil disobedience. You see him start to villainize himself a little bit, or become more of a villain, because he outsteps what is politically acceptable for the Johnson administration or the Kennedy administration or anything like that. He is beginning to now indict the issues of systemic racism, of political ineptitude, and of the Vietnam War, as we'll see. So now we're seeing King change from America's darling to a more villainized individual that is being a much more harsh critic of American policies.
And also for the new chatters, if at any point an ad does come up for you and we're in the middle of saying something, you can literally just ask us, like, hey, whoa, I got an ad. We'll stop what we're doing. We'll just chill here for a minute, and we'll just kind of like bullshit on like whatever it is that we're doing until the ad's over for you. We're all about getting this information out to you. I don't really care about making the money or not. God damn it.
Jeez.
All right, so, like, you know, a little bit of lore on me. I used to have a job where, you know, my commute was like an hour and a half, and I've always liked like Tuvan and Mongolian throat singing, and always thought it was like a fascinating thing. And you know, I like, you know, voice acting and stuff like that. So I taught myself how to do throat singing in my car, and you know, let's just see, like. And that's all you're getting for now, because, like, you know, now that, like, probably...
Keep it PG. Keep it PG for the new channels.
Now that, like, half of chat is left, all right.
Yeah, is there somebody in the Discord?
Oh, there might be. Oh, no.
What is that?
What did we do?
All right, so Watts transformed King, who now surveyed the depth and breadth of racial segregation, poverty, and anti-Black violence with new eyes. He characterized the past decade of civil rights activism as extracting uneven gains nationally. As the South freed itself from some of the worst vestiges of racial slavery and Jim Crow, the North lagged behind, plagued by institutional racism that ratcheted up Black unemployment, residential and public school segregation, police brutality, and crime. He daringly interpreted violence in Watts as a form of social protest by residents of a region unfamiliar with nonviolence. Like Malcolm X, King now regarded violent disruptions rooted in anti-Black racism as a form of political protest, one that he disagreed with but refused to cast negative judgments against. This proved to be a major turning point in King's rhetorical strategy against white supremacy and institutional racism. So what we're seeing now is a progression of King's perspective, who, you know, remains steadfast to the tactic of nonviolence throughout his life, but this is when he starts adopting that tone of the riot is the language of the unheard. And, you know, he's saying this more as that, like, I don't condone this. I don't condone this. I'm not saying that people should go out and commit acts of violence, but we have to understand that at times these things are unavoidable, and this will continue to happen if these issues are not remedied. Also, what's being highlighted here is that, the civil rights movement generally focuses on issues that happened in the South, the Jim Crow South, and that kind of can misleadingly seem that the North was this enlightened North that didn't have these racial problems. But we see in many places, such as riots in Harlem, issues in Philadelphia, and even in LA, where there's regular police brutality, riots, police assassinations happening, that this was a completely national issue, not just something that was sequestered into the South.
King's words eloquently frame the next chapter of his public career as a civil rights organizer. They also reveal Malcolm X's influence on his political worldview. It was in the aftermath of Malcolm's assassination and the Watts uprisings that King's transition began from a Nobel Prize-winning political mobilizer whose eloquent composure from a Birmingham jail, speech at the nation's capital, and presence in Selma placed him in the front ranks of American political royalty, into a revolutionary dissident vilified in quarters that once feted him. Watts marked a decisive shift in King's thinking about racial and economic justice, one that found him in closer alliance with Malcolm X.
There it is. And I put these slides together, and I wish I could remember when these points were brought up, but this is kind of exactly what I was saying, that, someone who was once, this Nobel Prize winning, darling of, the American civil rights movement now is becoming a revolutionary dissident who is vilified in quarters that once feted him. So we're seeing a growing radicalization of Dr. King following the passage of the Voting Rights Act and the inconsequential nature that it had to the life of Black people in the United States. So following the conference, King went to Mississippi, where he resumed the role of fireman, a position he once vowed to never perform again. What that means is, as a fireman, is that Dr. King kind of grew a certain reputation that if there was any racial issues, riots, other forms of disobedience, that like the mayor of that city could call him like, hey, Dr. King, we got some disobedience down here. Can you come and try to help us out? And that's what he refers to when he says like as a fireman, where he just is supposed to be running around the country, extinguishing these fires of racial unrest. He vowed he wouldn't do this again, but we see him kind of putting on his fireman's fireman suit once again. When James Meredith, the first Black student to enroll at the University of Mississippi and a strong figure in the movement, was shot by a white vigilante on June 6, King rushed to his bedside, despite Meredith's penchant for being a political wild card. Meredith's one-man march against fear across the entire state of Mississippi had received little attention until he was met with violence. The shooting drew SNCC and Stokely Carmichael to Mississippi as well. Carmichael and SNCC staff still felt residual tension from their disagreements with the SCLC and King in Selma, but Mississippi was SNCC territory, so familiar to Carmichael as to be considered a second home. No other organization could claim the extensive number of contacts or active projects in the state. Any successful march would, out of necessity, rely on SNCC's network. Carmichael instantly recognized the potential leverage and set out to take advantage of it. So move forward one. I feel like learning about the James Meredith situation is extremely important to understanding the broader context here. So we got a couple short videos on James Meredith and who he was to the civil rights movement. And then also the shooting that he was victimized by after that. So just two quick videos here.
In June 1962, a United States Court of Appeals ordered the University of Mississippi to admit James Meredith. It would take numerous attempts that year before the 29-year-old Air Force veteran and Mississippi native would become the first Black student at Ole Miss. Mississippi Governor Ross Barnett, a segregationist, personally blocked Meredith's first two attempts to enroll. Mississippi's lieutenant governor stopped his third attempt. Meredith's fourth attempt sparked violent riots, which left 2 people dead and several injured. On October 1st, 1962, federal marshals sent by President John F. Kennedy successfully escorted Meredith to enroll. They also accompanied him to classes. While Meredith gained entrance into the school, he didn't gain acceptance. Students were told it was their constitutional right to refuse to socialize or fraternize with an undesirable student. Meredith would endure ongoing isolation, harassment, and violence.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, you know,
He's like, look at him over there learning.
yeah, if your grandpa's any of those white dudes just glaring at this guy, right? Your grandpa's a scumbag.
Even his family
I agree Fargo is high.
A bullet fired into his home nearly injured his teenaged sister. Despite the hostility, Meredith remained steadfast, and on August 18, 1963, became the first black to graduate from the University of Mississippi, earning a degree in political science.
All right, so just a little background information of who this James Meredith is. So this was in 1962 when he embarked on his efforts to be the first black student in the Mississippi University. So now he is here again in Mississippi as these other situations that have Stokely Carmichael and Martin Luther King there. And he is the victim of a shooting during what is called the March Against Fear. So let's play that. This is another just 2-minute video that kind of goes into that shooting situation and gives us a little more of that context.
On June 6, 1966, civil rights activist James Meredith was shot and wounded in Mississippi on the second day of his 220-mile march against fear. Meredith had successfully integrated the University of Mississippi 4 years earlier. He organized a one-man march from Memphis to Jackson, Mississippi, to encourage voter registration in the black community, challenging the culture of fear perpetuated by white supremacists. Although planned as a solitary march, Meredith was joined by a few friends and supporters, and they were followed by police.
Just a few.
On day 2 of the march, Aubrey Norval, a white salesman, ambushed Mr. Meredith. He was shot in the neck, head, and back. Before shooting, Norval warned bystanders to disperse and twice shouted out Mr. Meredith's name. But the police did nothing to protect him. He survived his injuries, but Meredith was unable to immediately continue. So some civil rights leaders marched in his place. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Stokely Carmichael, and Floyd McKissick were among the thousands, including me, who completed the trip. Along the way, we were faced with harassment and physical abuse from angry mobs and law enforcement officers. Mr. Meredith was able to rejoin the march just before it ended in Jackson. And later that year, the would-be assassin, Aubrey Norval, pleaded guilty to assault and battery and was sentenced to 2 years in prison.
That's it?
Yeah, for premeditated attempted murder. Because I don't know if you heard the details.
Yeah,
this wasn't like
3
some kind of
gunshot, one to the neck.
Well, not only that, he called him out by name and asked other people to get out of the way. It's not like some. It's not like something. It's not like something like that they showed up there and there was a scuffle and the next thing you know they shot and there was a scuffle.
There was some amount of confusion about like, you know, what was going on here.
This guy
like
got into a car with a gun, drove there, said, "Hey, all you guys get out of the way. I'm going to shoot James Meredith. Hey, James Meredith, and then proceeds to shoot him in the head.
all you white people, get out of the way."
Yeah, exactly. That's essentially what he said. I need to more accurately shoot James Meredith.
That man right there.
Yeah, exactly. It was a Yes, exactly. It was an ambush, a premeditated ambush, and he received 2 years for assault and battery. I've never heard of the charge assault and battery for putting bullets into a man's head and neck,
Right?
But this is the Jim Crow South that we're dealing with. So let's go forward here.
Like, I've literally heard of people getting more time for, like, property damage than...
Drugs.
Yeah, drugs even. Fuck.
Is this one your turn or my turn?
I'll go.
Okay.
On June 7th, Bobby Kennedy, King's one-time nemesis turned crusading liberal senator from New York, announced at the University of Natal in Durban, South Africa, that if racial apartheid did not end, there is going... what is it? It's not...
Kennedy, come on, you got it.
There is going to be a major crisis, not only in Africa, but throughout the world. That same day, King led a press conference with fellow movement leaders before continuing James Meredith's march across Mississippi. Flanked by Carmichael and core leader Floyd McKissick, King addressed the reporters and television cameras that had descended on Mississippi. King lauded SNCC's Herculean efforts in the state and talked of plans to complete the march that Meredith began. I am confident that this march will have as great or greater impact than the march from Selma to Montgomery, said King. We are going all out to make this the largest march ever held in this section of the country, he continued. We want to put President Johnson on the spot. He called a conference to fulfill these rights, and we want them fulfilled. But words can't stop bullets. We want action, and we want it now. King's passionate words and challenge to the president pushed him away from the civil rights moderates and closer to the political radicals who, following Malcolm X, offered harsh truths as a balm for the nation's searing racial wounds.
Again, we see James Meredith attempts to do this one-man march in Mississippi. This is right on the heels of the march in Alabama from Selma to Montgomery that Dr. King took part in. James Meredith is shot, unable to continue his march. So now we have Dr. King and his constituents coming to complete the march that he was making to Philadelphia, Mississippi. Now, in doing this also, we see Dr. King further indicting the president of the United States, Johnson, saying we're going to turn the heat up on President Johnson. We're going to make him feel it, and we're going to make him take more stringent action here. This is, again, alienating Dr. King from the civil rights moderates, as we'll call them, and aligning him closer with those who were following Malcolm X just a year or two prior. All right, so over the next 3 weeks, the march made its way from Memphis, Tennessee to Jackson, Mississippi on highway. Oh, I accidentally deleted that number. King alternated on a highway. How about that? King alternated between flying to Chicago, where he spent most of his year organizing a movement to end segregation in the largest city the SCLC ever tackled, and marching in Mississippi, where his presence represented a clear draw for organizers, local people, and reporters. Stokely Carmichael filled the vacuum in King's absence. He welcomed King as a galvanizing force in service of Black political self-determination. Carmichael promoted the demonstration as an opportunity to organize the entire state of Mississippi, most importantly, the backwater towns and rural hamlets that had been the site of unspeakable violence against Black locals and civil rights workers. If King provided the march with the credibility of a statesman, Carmichael lent the proceedings the urgency of a radical. He rankled journalists by characterizing Mississippi as full of a bunch of racists. As the march progressed, SNCC organizers stressed the need to recruit Black demonstrators to ensure that Mississippi would not be a replay of Selma. Northern white liberals could not rescue the state, Carmichael argued. Only Black people could do that. So now we see kind of Dr. King positioning himself with a further radical element and being pretty much in, yes.
I didn't think it was a word when I first read it.
Positioning himself with far more radical elements than he ever has previously, and being alongside Stokely Carmichael, whose reputation and legacy as Kwame Ture, I don't think I need to elaborate on here. We're going to watch a small video on that in a moment, but we see Dr. King readily, standing side by side with someone who is on record, even during this time, as a proponent of non-violence, of having to use violence with
anti-non-violence.
Yes, exactly. Go ahead. Out my head.
But you read this one, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The go forward one.
On Thursday, June 16th, 1966, Carmichael transformed the political imagination of the civil rights movement and America's racial consciousness by calling for Black Power during an evening rally in Greenwood, Mississippi, with over 600 attendees. Earlier in the day, Carmichael had been arrested for trying to put up an overnight camp on the grounds of a black elementary school. "This is the 27th time that I have been arrested," said Carmichael. "I ain't going to jail no more. What we gonna start saying now is Black Power," he cried. "What do we want?" The crowd chanted back in the call and response tradition of the black church. Black Power. The slogan reflected SNCC's evolution, born out of a unique blend of racial integration, radical democracy, black nationalism, Gandhian nonviolence, and black Christian ethic of love.
Go forward. I think we have a small video here on like the birth of Black Power, and this is like a very interesting moment here in this civil rights evolution. Is when Stokely Carmichael first coined the term Black Power. And not only that, this is also around the time where they handed out pins that had Black Panthers on them, which would eventually become the symbol and namesake of the Black Panther Party. All inspired by Stokely Carmichael's work here in Mississippi.
Who himself was inspired by Malcolm X.
Exactly.
And actually even, I think before that, was actually involved in organizing with Martin Luther King.
Yes, he was part of Martin Luther King, and then he watched Malcolm X debate Bayard Rustin.
Yes.
And was enchanted with Malcolm X's performance in the debate against Bayard Rustin.
I think it's like incredible to have like, you know, a figure like James Baldwin and Stokely Kwame Ture, right? Because they both outlived like literally everyone else that was involved in the civil rights movement, but had radically different like what would you call it, analyses, outlooks, or opinions on like, you know, what the solutions were and all these other things, but were like friends with all of these figures.
Yep, definitely interesting. This is our
In
guy
1965,
again.
President Lyndon Baines Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act, bringing down one of the last legal vestiges of Jim Crow segregation. Just 5 days later, an altercation between an unarmed black man and the police sparked riots on the streets of Watts, a predominantly black neighborhood in Los Angeles. The riots revealed that America still faced deep racial issues, and in the coming years, urban unrest roiled cities across the nation.
Dr. King's message of nonviolence wore thin as the 1960s progressed, particularly because violence is everywhere.
As race relations deteriorated, Stokely Carmichael, a young, charismatic, electrifying speaker, was searching for a new way to reframe the civil rights struggle. And he found it through one resonant metaphor.
It's time we stand up and take over. Don't be afraid. Don't be ashamed. We want Black Power. We want Black Power. We want Black Power.
The civil rights movement had been extraordinarily successful, but there has not necessarily been the tangible transformation in black people's living conditions. Carmichael is making an argument that only Black Power will take black people to...
Go back just like 10 seconds.
Yes.
10 seconds. There you go. That is Peniel Joseph.
Oh shit,
that is
it?
the author of the book that we are currently reading. He is in this video to talk about it. But yeah, Peniel Joseph, The Sword and the Shield. So that face right there is the author of the book that we're currently reading.
Sorry, I took no chances and I banned the person that like, you know, tried to get into like.
Yeah,
you know,
we don't
the
have to
video
talk about it in front of everybody.
All right.
Just play it.
Transformation in black people's living conditions. Carmichael is making an argument that only Black Power will take black people to that next level.
Hey, what do you want? That's what we gonna get.
The effect is electrifying. Soon after, Black Power groups were organizing across the country, each with their own idea about what the phrase actually meant.
You got everybody from those that are saying, yes, let's go for elected office, to those that say, let's overthrow the government.
It called for self-determination. It called for an end to nonviolence is the only strategy of the Black movement.
Looking back, Black Power marked a startling shift in the civil rights movement and in the evolution of Black consciousness.
Black Power is really going to inspire a whole new wave of Black elected officials and inspire the Black arts movement using culture to transform what we think of as Black identity. Proud, strong Black women and men.
Black, the word that for decades so many African Americans most dreaded being called, almost overnight became both a battle cry and a badge of honor.
And now we have Rachel Dolezal.
Thank you, Kwame Ture.
Thank you, Kwame Ture. Which it's interesting though about Black Power is that I think that phrase was coined before white power. That white
like
supremacy.
white power. It's kind of like all lives matter. Like white power is like all lives matter to Black power.
Precisely. That literally like Black Power came first, Black Lives Matter came first, and it's only as a response or a reaction, right? Because they literally have the shittiest fucking branding ever, where it's just like your slogan is 14 words, like all 14 of them.
Well, and to quote,
in
James
1965.
Baldwin, there's nothing sadder to me than knowing that there's some white man in Mississippi that has nothing but his skin color to feel good about, to feel proud of.
Right.
Obviously, I'm paraphrasing. I cannot do justice to the eloquence of James Baldwin, but he has a great quote where he says something along the lines of, "I feel sorry for the white man who has nothing but his skin to feel proud of."
Let me see if I can pull it up.
Shout out James Baldwin. Is this you or me?
This is me. Yeah, this is you.
All right. Black nationalist elements had always existed in SNCC, their power tempered by the push toward interracial democracy, the influence of King and activists such as James Lawson and Ella Baker, and the belief that the movement contained a spiritual basis that would compel political transformation. But 6 years of organizing against white supremacy in the Deep South, the frustratingly inconsistent support of Northern liberals, and a federal government more concerned with winning an international war than establishing domestic peace had radicalized the organization. The small towns of Sunflower, Tunica, Belzoni, Grenada, and Tallahatchie were unfamiliar to most Americans, yet SNCC and Carmichael argued that these were the true laboratories of racial justice in American democracy. Black Power identified racial integration as a secondary to amassing political power capable of promoting radical Black citizenship and dignity. It also vociferously criticized the violence, segregation, and economic justice emanating from white institutions. In this sense, Black Power represented a structural critique of the multiple ways that racial terror and hypocrisy informed American democracy. The solution, Black Power activists implied, lay less in entertaining all white spaces than in building enough political, economic, and cultural power to decide whether or not to join the political mainstream, develop Black institutions, or some combination of both. So this is exactly like we were talking about earlier in terms of like Malcolm X's perspective on integration. Yeah, integration is great, but this problem does not begin or end with a cup of coffee at an integrated lunch counter. We need more in our communities for us to be able to build, be educated, be self-determinant, and then we can decide how much we want to engage with the white communities or the white supremacist power structure that has captivated us for so long. So you see SNCC, who after years of nonviolent organization, getting all these legislative bills passed and achieving the nominal support of presidents and everything like that, still aren't seeing anything more than these surface level token results. So now they're becoming more radical. Now Black nationalism, Black Power, Stokely Carmichael, the views of Malcolm X are becoming more widespread, and the nonviolence preached by Dr. King is falling out of favor, even amongst himself, even in his own pledges.
Right. Which again goes back to why we are reading this book, that these men of history, their legacies, right? They're not a complete picture. They're not a complete picture of who these people were by the end of their lives, right? They're not a totality of like, you know, the way in which they evolved, right? We have this snapshot in time of Malcolm X, you know, as this, you know, fire and brimstone, like, you know, member of the Nation of Islam, right? You know, but that's not where his legacy ended. We have, you know, MLK, you know, talking about I have a dream, you know, one day, like, you know, my black daughters will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, which is what he was referring to in that part of that speech, right? Near the end of his life is like, you know what? Malcolm X was kind of onto something.
Yeah, exactly. And we haven't even gotten to the Vietnam War yet, which you're going to see the most radical assessments by Dr. King. So tune in next chapter for that.
Yeah, we're getting there. On June 8th.
Question in chat here: has there ever been a move to form a black political party within the current system?
Yes.
I guess the answer to that would be the Black Panther Party, but I wouldn't say much of significance. No.
No, even before that, there was
Marcus Garvey.
Even after him, there was what's his name? The Malcolm X's friend that tried to form. I think it was separate from the Mississippi Democratic Freedom Party. I think there was one other one that we're missing.
Black political party, though.
Yeah, yeah.
I think they were trying to sit amongst.
No, but
the Democratic Party,
not the Maryland Democratic Freedom Party. But I think there was another one with that guy that interviewed Malcolm X. Not the guy that was like
James Farmer.
I think so. I think he tried to form a party.
I don't know enough to say definitively or anything, so we'll speculate on it.
OpenGL, you are correct though that the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense is probably the most well known of them, and to be honest, the most
and then there's
successful.
Garveyism also.
Right. But I would also go as far as to say that like the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense was honestly the most successful. I mean, like it's undeniable by the amount of programs that it started that like the federal government wound up, you know, trying to adopt on its own and then like underfund them and have them perform poorly. But anyways, on June 18th, King, along with 300 demonstrators and dozens of reinforcements, marched down a Mississippi highway toward Belzoni. They were antagonized by a burning cross and cars teeming with racists carrying signs reading Ku Klux Klan, Knights of the Green Forest. Marchers also passed a large placard with a photo of a young king attending Highlander Folk School citizenship class in the late 1950s. Mississippi state officials had rebranded the program as Communist Training School. Organizers urged black residents of the Delta's wide open spaces and cotton fields to temporarily abandon their work and join them. Many did, ditching hoes used to till cotton and stepping out of the humble shacks with slanted roofs to join the march, even for just a short time.
So Dr. King constantly being branded a communist by conservative elements throughout the country. You know, something that does get swept under the rug a little bit as, you know, Dr. King has become, you know, the symbol that has been appropriated into the American structure. They don't talk about him being a communist or advocating for wealth redistribution or criticizing capitalism pretty much since he was in seminary school. Go ahead. This is just, I don't think there's any sound to this for some reason, but this was like the best footage that I could find of Dr. King marching in Mississippi towards Philadelphia. It's only 2 minutes long, but
there's no music.
We can only see what's going on.
Oh yeah, this is I think footage that was used at the beginning of our episode, normally for like the first half hour before, you know, we pop up on the screen. We try to find a video that's like relevant to what we're going to be reading, what we're going to be talking about today. And there was a news story literally from I think like 1966 or 67 that also used this kind of footage or footage from this march at the beginning of the stream. So when we, you know, tweet out or when we post it like, hey, we're going live, right? Normally around 5:30, right? We'll start with like a little video like this for you guys to watch while you're just waiting for us to come on.
It's really amazing how they touch up this footage and the audio, and this one doesn't have audio, but there's old videos of Dr. King speaking where they put it in color and he sounds like he's right next to you. It's amazing how they can rehabilitate these images. Look at him.
It's just when it's in color, it's crazy how young he looks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Malcolm.
Yeah. Like,
Malcolm
look, there's Kwame. He looks like our fucking age, man.
He probably is. He might be younger than us.
Yeah, actually, yeah. He might be like a fucking...
Probably younger than we currently are.
He's probably still in his 20s and shit.
Probably. He's so much taller than Martin Luther King.
I mean, as we learned previously, MLK was only 5'7". So short kings.
Short king.
You can find love. You can find love. You can find ladies.
Well, hey, he was kind of a player.
Yeah.
All things considered, you know what I mean? He was getting around.
Yeah. We discussed that in earlier chapters as well.
Right.
So, like, don't let height keep you down. And if you are 5'7", lie. Just say you're 5'10". Just lie, all right? I'm a huge proponent of that. Nobody's going to break out, like, the fucking tape measure and actually double check. Just lie, all right?
Yeah, I think that if everyone's paying attention, you see all like the Confederate groups, like counter protesters, like there to like heckle them as they walk by.
I'm hoping that anybody that came in from left flank vets that's watching this, anytime a Confederate flag, enters their field of vision, they're very aware of it.
I believe that they would be. I don't think they're that, unaware of what's going on here.
Kind of hard to miss.
Yeah. All right, yeah, so that's a little bit of the march to Philadelphia, Mississippi, that is, not Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, just for anybody wondering.
All right, is this me?
Yes.
On June 21st, King led a detour to the small town of Philadelphia, Mississippi. That's right, motherfuckers. There's a Philadelphia in Mississippi. For the second anniversary memorial of James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Mickey Schwerner, whose 1964 deaths at the hands of a combination of racist law enforcement officials and local white terrorists less than 2 weeks before the passage of the Civil Rights Act made them enduring martyrs. Throughout the detour, marchers confronted as many as 300 white locals, including Deputy Cecil Price, the folk hero, Klansman, and law enforcement officer facing federal charges in the disappearance of Chaney, Goodman, and Schwerner. King led the group down the red clay streets toward the Neshoba County Courthouse, the site of a public memorial. "Oh yes," said King, recognizing Price standing in front of the courthouse surrounded by deputies. "You're the one who had Schwerner and the other fellows in jail." Price immediately replied, "Yes, sir." King knelt on the street and prayed for the souls of the 3 civil rights workers.
So, if you recall, when we were talking earlier, we watched a video about the brutal and grisly murder and torture of 2 white and 1 black civil rights activists in Philadelphia, Mississippi, or close outside of it, who were detained and released, and upon being released from jail, disappeared. Their bodies were found 6 weeks later, murdered, mutilated, tortured by Klansmen. So what is happening here is this guy Price, I guess he's the sheriff or something like that, was the one responsible for locking them up. And as Dr. King walked by him, he recognized him and said, "Oh, you're the sheriff that locked up those guys that are now, buried in a shallow grave after being tortured." Right. And his reply is, "Yes, sir."
Yeah. And that video honestly broke me. I cried on stream yet again. Because I have feelings. I'm soft and that shit hurts to watch.
White locals jeered King, hurling insults and driving perilously close to demonstrators. As law enforcement stood by and watched, several skirmishes broke out between white thugs and protesters who defended themselves. Bands of white youth burst through parts of the march, pushing and shoving demonstrators, knocking down reporters and breaking television cameras. Deputy Price refused to allow protesters access to the courthouse lawn. So King, joined this day by Ralph Abernathy, conducted a prayer service surrounded by hundreds of angry whites and 10 sheriff's deputies. King acknowledged the tension in the air. Amid boos and jeers, he noted Philadelphia as the site of the most brutal murders 2 years earlier. "I believe in my heart that the murderers are somewhere around me at this moment," King remarked to murmurs of white approval. "I want you to know that we are not afraid," he said. "If they kill 3 of us, they will have to kill all of us." King's face poured with sweat as he received cheers from black marchers and heckling from an outer ring of whites. I am not afraid of any man, he said, whether they lived in Birmingham or Boston, Mississippi, or Michigan. Hey, Luther, someone yelled from the outer ring, come up here alone and prove it. On Deputy Price's orders, whites tossed small fireworks near King, who continued amid thunderclaps that sounded like gunshots. Chaos interrupted his closing prayer. Rocks, bottles, and eggs were launched at demonstrators. The now shaken King watched in horror as disorder broke out. So, this is the type of resistance that he is being met. And keep in mind, do you know what they're doing right now? Do you know what they're walking towards? They're walking towards a memorial for those 3 activists that were brutalized, tortured, and buried in a shallow grave by Klansmen. They're trying to attend a memorial for those 3 individuals, and this is the level of resistance. They're not going to pull down the Confederate flag or tear down a Robert E. Lee statue. Not saying that those things wouldn't be justified, because they certainly would be, but like, this is one of the most benign, activities that they could be in, and this is the level of violent resistance that they're receiving with the complacency of the sheriff's office and police, which isn't a surprise at this point, but it's important to note. Yep, in my town and well beyond this time, the sheriff would tip off Klansmen that prisoners were being transported through a particular stretch of woods in Huntsville, Texas. They never made it to Huntsville alive, as the sheriff intended. Yep, that's exactly what happened here to these 3 during Freedom Summer. Wilco, uneasy to think there's folks are probably still alive and someone's grandmother, grandfather. Yeah, a lot of the people that you see that are there heckling these people are very young. Very young people that are probably still walking around to this day. And, maybe they renounced their poisonous racism.
Doubt it. I think they're probably. I think they're in their fucking hover around, buzzing around fucking Walmart, on their little fucking rascal scooter, complaining about the price of eggs and all this other shit. Haven't changed a fucking beat. That's what I think. The same judges and sheriffs that enacted this behavior in my town have grandchildren that sit in the same judge seat, because that's how fucking things work. Mm-hmm. All right,
100%.
And it didn't have to be like that. I hope that one day that we're actually able to read the 1865 book by Gerald Horne, because I think he talks about how Reconstruction was just completely fucking abandoned because they never took the fucking Confederacy to task, right? They allowed them to overthrow any semblance of freed slaves electing their own fucking government, or having any kind of say in the construction of the South that they were fucking part.
Nepotism is bigoted. Do go on.
All right, next slide, right?
Yep. A little bit more marching. This one I think has audio. Am I wrong?
No, you are correct, I think.
There's the name of James Chaney. I believe that was the black individual of the 3 that were murdered.
I need to know where all of these plinth helmets are coming from.
And just, not to really harp on it, but Goodman and Schwerner were killed relatively quickly. They kept the one black individual alive for quite longer in terms of torture. That was in one of the previous videos we watched, but important to note just in terms of what we're dealing with here in Mississippi.
This audio was recorded using a yak back.
Right after this. That you said you were going to Indianola, Mississippi after you left here. What's happening in Indianola, Mississippi?
Well, we'll have a mass rally and a mass march on the courthouse there, where we will continue our pattern of seeking to get people registered to vote by going directly to the place where they ought to vote, and of course protesting the continued injustices in the state of Mississippi.
How is the registration drive in Indianola, Mississippi going?
I don't know. I haven't had a chance to talk with the community in the last day or two, so I don't know exactly how it's going. But I'm sure that our activities there today will spur the drive very much.
Dr. King, are they having a tougher time in the Delta cities, the Delta counties of Mississippi than other parts of Mississippi in their voter registration drive?
Well, it's tough all over Mississippi. Mississippi is a state that has consistently resisted any move to rid itself of racism. So that the Delta certainly has grave problems in this area, but the whole state of Mississippi still has not come to terms with its conscience.
Thank you for being here, Miss Frizzle.
Thank you for taking interest in this.
Yeah.
Because obviously we could be on here just doing our half-baked takes that aren't based on like books or literature or historical precedent or anything like that. We can be talking about our favorite candies or television shows or streaming a video game or something like that. We have a specific interest in covering like in-depth historical topics from a leftist perspective. So if you're interested in that type of content, we will be here faithfully to do this type of thing.
Jesus Christ. $60 fucking years. 60 fucking years. What is different? What is different? Nothing. Yeah, Sam. As long as we vote really fucking hard, you know, especially like for people where, like, you know, I believe it's Mississippi in the year 2023 is trying to reinstate Jim Crow again, so that literally nothing can be fucking different.
Now, and we're ready to get started now. At this time, may we assemble and be quiet and sing a song entitled, which is the freedom song, "Oh Freedom."
Do you remember during when Black Lives Matter started protesting in the middle of roads to block traffic, that there would be these like ghouls on TV being like, MLK would have never done anything like that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's definitely something, one of the misconceptions that we're trying to combat here.
And we do not intend to stay all day, because we have other places to go and other things to do. But we are not going to continue to be interrupted
intend to stay here, and we don't want to stay here. We want to be prayerful and worshipful now. But let the policeman move that car out of the way and stop that noise so we can get on with our prayer service.
You know what? Sam actually brings up an interesting point. That because of like redlining, gerrymandering, right? And the criminalization of, you know, whole swaths of the black population in the South, there's probably a lot of people that would like to vote differently in the South, but are unable to.
Now we are ready for the scripture.
Absolutely.
Things have subsided. Fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity.
Yeah, Red Wizard, I don't disagree on what you're saying. You know, I try to take a more pragmatic approach to what type of weaponry needs to be utilized to change, you know, social conditions. But I can't say that you're wrong.
There thou shalt be fed. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. Commit thy way unto the Lord. Trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass.
Oh, wow, interesting.
And he shall bring forth.
Thank you, Socks and Buskin, for that. I didn't know that there was like a precursor like that to Peniel Joseph's book. That's very interesting.
Let the Thanksgiving.
And Red Wizard, I do agree with that as well, as that, you know, electoral politics is necessary, but that doesn't mean that we just need to support uncritically the Democratic Party in any instance, essentially.
As we come this morning, we ask you to look down on the Bible.
All right.
Whew. This episode's rough on me today, man. It's like it's fucking me up.
So on Thursday, June 23rd in Canton, Mississippi, King found himself in the middle of more racial violence. It just doesn't end. 3,000 demonstrators marched to the town. They had a dispute with local authorities over putting up a tent at a black school. King and the protesters stood defiant. If necessary, remarked King, we're willing to fill up all the jails in Mississippi. Mississippi Highway Patrol fired tear gas and wielded nightsticks against individuals attempting to set up tents. This is the very state patrol that President Johnson said would protect us. King shouted to a stunned crowd seeking refuge from the outbreak of police violence. Anyone who will use gas bombs and women and children can't and won't protect anybody. Sounded like Malcolm X. He said, sounding more like Carmichael. Okay, I didn't even realize the next line, but both who had been temporarily felled by gas. Later, Carmichael tried to help in organizing a retreat. Don't make your stand here, he said at one point as he wandered through the chaos. I just can't see any more people get shot. So what we're seeing here is King starting to sound a lot like Malcolm, saying that, yo, if they're going to start putting dogs on you and spraying you with water hoses or throwing tear gas at you, these people can and can't and won't protect you.
Right.
Now, also, what's the other part that I wanted to bring up? Okay, so Dr. King. So I sang a lot of praises of Lyndon B. Johnson earlier. I offered some degree of, acknowledgement to the progressivism of his, campaign against poverty and, what he at least said on camera about the civil rights movement. But now we can see, that, what you always need to be conscious of in terms of dealing with politicians. Dr. King called up Johnson and said, hey, we might need some protection down here. This is the type of protection that we're getting, and Dr. King called him out for it and said, this is the very state patrol that President Johnson said today would protect us. What are they doing? Are they protecting us, or are they pelting us with tear gas?
I believe they are pelting them with tear gas.
I believe B, pelting with tear gas.
And on top of that, I think it's also kind of interesting that, Kwame is sort of filling in that kind of void that Malcolm would have taken up, right?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Wait, did I skip too many?
This is no, you're good.
Okay. King and Carmichael delivered competing speeches during the June 26th closing rally in Jackson, Mississippi, an event that captured long-running tensions between the SCLC and SNCC, and reflected the movement's transition from a focus on political reform to a demand for more far-reaching institutional and structural change. competing chants from SNCC organizers shouting Black Power and SCLC activists yelling Freedom Now marked the final day's walk from Tougaloo College to the Capitol building. King's staff distributed American flags while Carmichael's surrogates passed out stickers featuring a snarling Black Panther. King preached a commitment to nonviolence to an audience that was beginning to lose faith in the combined powers of moral persuasion and massive protest. In a move that might have made Malcolm X smile, King confessed that his dream of multiracial democracy had turned into a nightmare for African Americans.
So, the very words of Malcolm X, which was viewed as adversarial or antithetical to that of Dr. Martin Luther King, where Malcolm X said, what you call a dream is a nightmare to us. That's what he said about Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. Here is Martin Luther King making an acknowledgement that that dream I spoke of in 1963 has turned into a nightmare.
Right.
How often is that brought up by the political pundits, the news broadcasters, the public schools? How often is it that, hey, Martin Luther King had this really fancy I Have a Dream speech, and he said that I hope one day that everybody will just be like completely colorblind and not focus on racial issues at all? Yeah. How much of that, which is a complete mischaracterization of it, but how much do they say like, hey, that I Have a Dream speech that we loud so loudly?
Yeah. Where is Don?
Loudly. That we loud so enthusiastically. Where is it the point where just a year or so later, he's in the throes of racial chaos in Mississippi that he says, that dream I had has turned into a nightmare?
Where is Don Lemon fucking with holding back tears in his eyes, quoting my dream has turned into a nightmare? Right. And as far as Altmas Frizzle, your comment, electoral politics feels useless when you live in a state like Texas, to be honest. That's the simplest way I can sum up how I feel. The hoops we have to jump through in order to vote for shitty Dem candidates, then have to go online and enduring the, quote, Texas deserves X horrible thing for how they vote comment is shitty. And that is what we fucking talked about when we had our guest Lena from the Work Stoppage podcast talking about what's going on in East Palestine, Ohio, and that anyone that says that these people deserve it because look how they fawn over Trump or they voted Republican or some other fucking nonsense like that is disgusting. That is fucking irreconcilably reprehensible. You should be fucking shamed and you should be quiet for the rest of your fucking life if you ever say anything like that, right? As far as fucking even for the people that do fawn over Trump from East Palestine, right, or any of these other states, right, that do think that Ted Cruz is the voice for them or some shit. That doesn't mean that they fucking deserve death, right? We're not gonna make jokes about guillotines in the wall. I get it, it's funny, right? But also for the fucking people that don't vote for Ted Cruz, that don't vote for the government that's currently in East Palestine, right? They don't fucking deserve it either. Right? They didn't vote for that shit. There's whole swaths of marginalized people in the South and in these states, right, with a horrible representation that they didn't fucking vote for them, and they have no means of voting for fucking change because we live in a system that doesn't value not even just poor people, but especially marginalized people that would seek to change that.
Right, and to go off, was it Wilco? Yeah, Wilco. He also perhaps foresaw his co-option by the establishment for political expedience. He was seeing this at the time during the Johnson administration. He even says this. He says, all these political representatives are getting real tight now that I'm talking about these things, when before they were welcoming me into their city and giving me lavish praise. They were welcoming me in the city when I was used as a tool to pacify people. But now that I'm calling out institutional racism, wealth redistribution in the Vietnam War, now they're awfully tight. Now they're not so happy with me anymore. So he was recognizing that while he was still alive.
Fuck.
All right.
Black Power's arrival on the national scene coincided with King's campaign to end housing segregation and urban poverty in Chicago, a city ruled by the combined might of legendary Mayor Richard Daley and a ruthless local Democratic Party machine. King responded to the Black Power controversy by adopting what he considered to be the movement's virtues, while projecting nonviolence as the best strategy for the political struggles ahead. On July 10th, King spoke at Soldier Field to a crowd of more than 30,000 about the Chicago freedom movement and the larger Black liberation struggle. He fused aspects of Black nationalism and political self-determination with an unyielding commitment to peacefully disruptive protest. Quote, "We must be proud of our race," King insisted. "We must not be ashamed of being Black. We must believe with all our hearts that Black is as beautiful as any other color." King's words could be traced back to Malcolm X's emphasis on recognizing civil rights as a referendum on Black dignity. But King, like Malcolm after the Hajj, resisted the general denunciations of white racism that gripped portions of the Black movement, reminding those in attendance of the practical need for interracial coalitions and the sacred bond forged with white activists who risked their lives for Black citizenship. King lauded white Americans who cherished democratic principles above privilege, even as they became less visible in the public imagination. Less visible in the public imagination, the more Black demands for justice increased.
Here is Dr. King calling out directly, identifying white privilege, but also saying, white Americans are. Can you just go back?
I'm sorry. I wasn't even thinking.
That white Americans who cherish democratic principles over privilege. So that they, these white Americans, they don't care that much about democracy, sincere democracy. They care more about their privileged positions in society than they do about sincere democratic principles.
Right.
Go ahead. Black power hovered over the midterm elections of 1966. Racial fatigue over civil rights, desegregation, and urban riots formed a toxic brew that found Republicans winning significant congressional gains that foreshadowed the coming presidential election. The Voting Rights Act allowed federal registrars to spot check counties that refused to comply with the legislation's elimination of poll taxes and other processes that restricted Black access. Yet voter suppression and intimidation continued to thrive in parts of the South, especially in rural areas where local officials defied civil rights laws through using threats of physical violence and economic reprisal. The Meredith March in Mississippi succeeded in registering thousands of new Black voters, but many more remained unable to vote or unwilling to even try. Those who made it to the polls in 1966 found a climate that differed starkly from the feel-good election 2 years earlier, which had taken place in the shadow of the Kennedy assassination. Political realignment between the major parties openly hinged on the willingness to offer safe harbor to racists. Moderate Republicans, like Massachusetts senatorial candidate Edward Brooke, struck gold with lines touting, "A vote for me is a vote against Stokely Carmichael." Actor turned dashing conservative spokesman Ronald Reagan swamped incumbent Edmund Brown in California's gubernatorial race with a bracingly pugnacious campaign opposing civil rights, Black radicalism, and Carmichael's frequent presence in the state. Lyndon Johnson privately blamed the Democratic Party's loss of 3 senators and 47 congressmen on a seemingly ungrateful core constituency. "I think the Negroes lost it," he told aides.
That's disgusting.
This is what's happening on the back end here. You have, for one, you have Republicans and conservatives using Stokely Carmichael as like a scapegoat or pariah to run their political campaigns against, saying, if you vote for me, you're voting against Stokely Carmichael, which was obviously, it fell on sympathetic ears of white individuals throughout the country because they did receive quite a bit of support. You have Ronald fucking Reagan winning, I guess, the California governorship.
The great Satan.
The great Satan himself by, running on opposing civil rights, opposing Black radicalism, and, scapegoating Stokely Carmichael again. And then Lyndon Johnson, telling his aides in the background, "I think the reason why we lost it is because of the Negroes." Implying I supported the Negroes too much. I gave too much.
Look what they did to me.
That dang Negro cause. And now we're losing senators and congressmen.
Right. Which is just disgusting.
All that praise, and everything, the complexities of history require you to, traverse through different time periods and different incidents and everything like that. So, when I see the poverty thing, I'll give the kudos to that when it's necessary, but then you always have to compare that to what's being said here, FBI surveillance, the Vietnam War, everything like that, which in my opinion greatly outshines it, but still.
Whoa. OpenGL said the man who used astrology to determine his policy positions and was suffering from severe Alzheimer's his entire time as president, as confirmed by his son, IIRC. Which I don't, to this day. I'm like 33 years old. I don't know what IIRC means.
If I recall correctly.
Oh, okay. If I recall correctly. And I'm going to use that from now on. But also, wasn't his son like a Dawkins, like new atheist type or something?
Surprised.
Martin Luther King Jr.'s radicalization took public shape against the backdrop of the political triumph of the Voting Rights Act and the violence that engulfed Los Angeles less than a week later. The radical King linked the effectiveness of voting rights to the entrenched poverty and racial segregation that marked too many urban cities. Watts amplified King's efforts to turn the civil rights struggle into a human rights movement that expansively defined black citizenship and, in the process, reimagined American democracy. King's working alliance with the Johnson administration and white liberals frayed as the Vietnam War took increasing resources, energy, and commitment away from the movement for racial justice. As Black Power tapped into the unspoken anger, pain, and pride of black people across the nation, King deeply empathized with the movement's insistence on radical black citizenship as he disagreed with its supporters on goals, tactics, and strategies.
Yes, and so again, we're seeing the ever-increasing radicalization of Martin Luther King as a public figure. Watts played into this, the ineptitude of the Johnson administration played into this, the absolute chaos of racial unrest going on in Mississippi and Alabama contributed to this, and then ultimately the Vietnam War played a decisive role in this, which the next chapter, this chapter was called The Radical King. The next chapter is called The Revolutionary King. And that will be the last chapter that we will be covering for this book. So tune in on Sunday. We will be going over that final chapter of the epilogue and The Revolutionary King. And we will be wrapping up our Subversive History coverage of The Sword and the Shield by Peniel Joseph. And we will be moving on to The Great Father by Francis Paul Prussia, which is the United States government and the American Indians. If you want to go forward, though, I do have one last piece of information that I did include here. And this is a video from just 1 month ago on Martin Luther King Day. Oh, shit. There's one more slide. My bad. Hold on one second. King's radicalization in the 18 months after Malcolm X's assassination found him on the precipice of losing faith in the vision of black freedom struggle tied to civic democracy that had sustained him over the previous decade. He found a renewed purpose and amplified sense of mission by connecting the broad sweep of the struggle for black dignity with the individual humanity of the dispossessed from all racial and ethnic backgrounds, whose lives, he argued, not only mattered, but deserved a place of honor in the nation. King searched with increasing fervor to illustrate the universality of race, democracy, and citizenship through the particular lens of a black freedom movement that he remained convinced held the key not only to racial justice, but to an end to war, poverty, and violence in America and beyond. So pretend I said everything else that I just said before this, after it, and move forward to the next slide.
Also, I just wanted to include just this little bit. Do you remember a couple streams ago we were talking about how Carmichael had like a very almost particular accent?
Yeah.
So the book actually discusses where that mixture of his accent and where it comes from. Is it okay if I read it real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Carmichael's Quicksilver delivery reflected his itinerant young adulthood in Trinidad, the Bronx, and parts of the Deep South. He combined the thoughtfulness of an academic with the rapid-fire delivery of a native New Yorker, massaged through a slight Caribbean lilt, topped off by a Southern drawl. What?
Did Twitch crash for you?
Oh, fuck. I don't think so.
Like, for me, like, the whole program crashed.
Don't say that.
Well, no, it's like not, I don't think it's us. It's like I can't even go to, like, the Twitch.
Chat, do we have L's?
It's something in my, I can't even open the browser. I can't even see chat. But whatever, just finish. I think I just opened on my phone and it looks like it worked.
Okay, all right. I think it's just something on your end because I just got 2 people saying they're fine.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. I'd be freaked out too.
I can only see it on my phone. So this came out 1 month ago. So I want everybody to know this is 1 month ago, 2023, on Martin Luther King's birthday.
Obviously,
Or
we remember
Martin Luther
Dr.
King
King
Day.
now as
What are you doing to me here, man?
Me?
Yeah.
Why? What happened?
It's Rachel Maddow. All right, fine.
one of the greatest moral leaders ever produced by our country. But he really did have the whole power of the state turned against him in his day, which really wasn't all that long ago. Today, in every state in the country, we celebrate that federal holiday honoring Dr. King. But in 2 states, in Alabama and Mississippi, today is not just Martin Luther King Day. Today in Alabama and Mississippi, it's King Lee Day. Not kingly like an adverb, not like he ruled in a kingly way, but King-Lee, as in Martin Luther King and Robert E. Lee. In Mississippi and Alabama today, in 2023, they have added to Martin Luther King Day another state holiday on the same day, honoring the commander of the Confederate Army that fought to preserve slavery. And Virginia used to do that too until the year 2000. And Arkansas used to do that too. They used to do King Lee Day as well until 2018. But even if it took them a
Arkansas, that remember, when they integrated the schools, closed down all of their public schools until the fucking 70s.
long time to get there, at least Arkansas and Virginia did finally give it up and stop using the federal Martin Luther King civil rights holiday to also honor slavery. Mississippi and Alabama are still doing that as of this year, which is amazing.
All right, that's enough for her.
Well, I mean, the information is legitimate.
The information, yes, is legitimate. I'm not denying that.
But this is where we're still at in 2023.
Obviously, we remember Dr. King now as
where
one of the
Mississippi
greatest
and Alabama,
moral
which if
leaders.
you recall, Mississippi and Alabama are these 2 war zones that we were just reading about. You know, Mississippi and, you know, Selma, Alabama, Philadelphia, Mississippi, and Selma, Alabama are the racial war zones that we're still dealing with after the Voting Rights Act is passed and the Civil Rights Act is passed.
Yeah, I feel like there was one other part of the book where, you know how like a lot of people try to say that like Stokely Carmichael is like, you know, well, because of like the Black Power thing, oh, he like doesn't care about like white people or something. That people will try and make that kind of argument.
Yeah.
But there was like this one part of the book where they literally said like, no, he actually like had like a good friend of his that he organized with that was white that was murdered, that like, you know, he was like deeply wounded by. I'm trying to find that part. I should have highlighted it.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I mean, there's only like so much before we're literally just like going through the fucking PDF on stream.
Look, yeah, I have to like be like somewhat censorious as I go through it so that I, you know, we're not here forever.
Yeah,
I already feel like I do way too much.
No. You are way better at this than I am. We would literally be just scrolling through the PDF if it was just me. I don't know how to do what you do. I can't. Because everything, like, you know, in all of these books that we read is just like, all of this needs to stay. They need to know all of this.
Yeah. But that is the end of the presentation for today. Looks like we still have like 60 people in here. I don't know if you just want to hang out and bullshit or do whatever. I mean, it's...
Yeah, I mean, like, we're not even at 4 hours yet. Normally, like, you know...
Yeah. We can go longer. I'm down. What's up, everybody? Nice to... I'm sure there's not a lot of new faces in here. How's everybody doing? Anything anybody wants to talk about, ask us about? We are prone to going out on tangents when someone elicits them.
Well, for all the YouTube viewers, we're going to stop the recording now, and, you know, we'll see you again. There's not going to be a stream this Friday. We should probably start letting people know that, like, there's not going to be a stream this Friday. But, yeah, we'll see you next time. So I'm going to stop the recording now.
Sam said it would be